Good morning, everyone. The regular Wednesday, February 7th, 2024 Board of Commissioners meeting is hereby called to order. Before we begin, I will recognize former Mayor Bob Mueller in the audience today. Welcome, sir. Always glad to have you. If you will, please join me in a few moments of silence. Now, if you'll stand as you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is adoption of the agenda, and a motion would be in order.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That brings us to recognitions, and the first we'll call Nancy Carowin to the podium.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. I would like to introduce Larry Bunting. Larry was born in Pennsylvania. His father was an auto mechanic, so Larry grew up being able to work on cars. His career path led him to road construction, where he learned to operate heavy equipment. From there, he went to a chemical plant and then to Roche Vitamins. In 1997, he became a volunteer firefighter, where he progressed up to chief, a position he held for 4 years. When Larry wasn't at his full-time job of volunteering with the fire department, he was working at the Poconos Raceway. He has worked at NASCAR tracks in Dover, Charlotte, and Bristol. Larry enjoys the outdoors, and he likes to hunt and fish. On some weekends, you can find him at his home in Manteo, firing up his smoker. We at Public Works hope to share in the end results of those weekends. Larry Bunting.
4 years.
Okay.
I burned out 4 years. I was done. 4 years be done.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good luck to you, Larry.
Thank you, Nancy, and welcome aboard, Larry. That brings us to Randy Wells for a recognition.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I already hit Larry up for volunteer firefighter. Just want you to know that. It is my distinct honor to introduce Guy Crocker, a dedicated member of our Nags Head Fire Department. Guy began his career with the town in January 22nd, 2019. Engineer Crocker has demonstrated unwavering dedication and served with distinction for 5 years, embodying the core values of our department: courage, commitment, and compassion. In his role, Guy Crocker has consistently displayed courage in the face of adversity, whether responding to emergencies or helping his team through a challenging situation. His commitment to our community's safety has been unwavering, evident in his tireless hours of dedication to his responsibilities. Moreover, Engineer Crocker has shown compassion, understanding the human element in every situation, and approaching his duties with empathy. In addition to his outstanding service within the Nags Head Fire Department, Engineer Crocker is not only a dedicated professional, but a devoted family man. For the past 10 years, he has been happily married to his wife, Lauren, and together they share the joys of parenthood with their daughter, Lila and Willow. Guy enjoys spending time at the beach with his family, visiting the mountains, and woodworking. It is a great pleasure and honor to present to you for recognition, Guy Crocker.
Randy will be staying up there for a really significant recognition this morning for 25 years of service.
Honorable Mayor and Commissioners, I stand before you today to honor and celebrate an exceptional career of Lieutenant Diego Deanne, a true example of courage, commitment, and compassion in service to Nags Head Fire Rescue. On December 29, 1998, Lieutenant Deanne embarked on a journey that would span 25 years, leaving an indelible mark on our community. Throughout his tenure, Lieutenant Deanne has demonstrated unwavering courage in the face of adversity. His steadfast commitment to ensuring the safety and security of our town has been nothing short of remarkable. Whether facing the challenges of a fire or navigating emergencies with resilience, Lieutenant Deanne's courage has been a guiding light for his colleagues and an inspiration for the community. In addition to his acts of courage, Lieutenant Deanne embodies the compassion in every aspect of his service. His commitment extends beyond the call of duty and has consistently shown empathy and understanding to those in distress. Whether comforting a community member during a crisis or providing support to his fellow firefighters, Lieutenant Deanne's compassion has fostered a sense of unity and care within the Nags Head Fire Rescue. Lieutenant Deanne's commitment to his role not only is evident in his professional duties, but also in the balance he maintains with his professional life. He is a dedicated family man, illustrated by his unwavering support of his wife Jenna and their children Tyler, Maya, and Tessa. Showcases a commitment to the community values that extend beyond the fire station. As we gather to honor Lieutenant Deanne's 25 years of service, let us acknowledge the profound impact he has had on the Nags Head Fire Rescue and express our gratitude for his tireless dedication, leadership, and positive influence he has had on the safety and well-being of our community. Congratulations, Lieutenant Deanne.
Diego, I'd like to ask the commissioners to come around. We have something for you. I'd like to present you with this from the board, the certificate of appreciation, which reads in part that the town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners express their sincere admiration and appreciation for your outstanding performance of duty in the past and extends its best wishes for continued success and many more productive years for the town. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, sir. Congratulations.
It's like, where are we going? Stay for the rest.
She was having fun.
Over.
That's awesome.
Very good.
It's like, where are we looking? Just look around.
The town of Nags Head is blessed to have employees like Diego who stay here for a long time and offer the service that they do to our community. That brings us to a proclamation for Annual Safety Week and Deputy Chief Height.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners, audience. Thank you very much for bringing forth this proclamation for our Annual Safety Week. If I may, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about our Safety Committee and some of the things that we do. Our Safety Committee is represented from each department in the town. We meet regularly to discuss any safety-related items and any things that we can do to hopefully make our workplaces safer. One big event that we plan annually is our Annual Safety Week, where we have numerous training events, including CPR, defensive driving, OSHA classes, and we're even going to have a chili cook-off this year so everybody can come together and celebrate and enjoy our week. I appreciate the board recognizing our Safety Week, and we hope that all town employees and the board can even attend some of the training events. So thank you for recognizing us today.
Very good, thank you. And with that, I will read the proclamation for the board's consideration. Proclamation of Safety Week. Whereas the Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners, employees, and citizens are committed to the maintenance of a safe and healthful workplace. And whereas the town has assumed an active role in the promotion of a safe and healthful work environment by a program of regular occupational worksite evaluations and employee safety education. And whereas the town strives to stimulate and maintain an interest in loss control and accident prevention, and recognizes past and future services to the employees and citizens of Nags Head. And whereas the town seeks to guide and encourage the adoption and institution of safe work practices by all employers and employees in Nags Head, therefore the Town of Nags Head Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim March 4th through 8th, 2024 as Safety Week in the Town of Nags Head and commends this observance to our citizens. Furthermore, in recognition of this proclamation, I invite all Nags Head employees to attend the annual Nags Head Safety Luncheon Chili Cook-Off on Thursday, March the 7th, 2024, from 12 noon to 2 p.m. at the Douglas A. Ramaley Fire Station, number 16, this being the 7th day of February, 2024. And a motion to adopt would be in order.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Who is the chili cook-off open to?
So the chili cook-off is normally open to all employees, but I think if a board member also wanted to cook some chili, I think that'd be a very good idea.
Very good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate that. That brings us to public comment, and I will turn this over to Mr. Leidy.
At this time, the board welcomes members of the public to provide comment to the board. This is not an opportunity for dialogue, and the board rarely responds to public comment, but it is an opportunity to address the board. Anybody who wishes to provide comment, if you would, please go to the podium, tell us your name and where you live, and then address your remarks to the board. I will also point out that we have 2 public hearings on the agenda for today. If your comments relate to one of those public hearings, you can wait until the public hearing to provide your comments. Mr. Muller.
Thank you. My name is Bob Muller. I live at 124 West Old Cove Road. Some of you might remember that back at the budget hearing in June, I came to you and I asked you to install a bus stop type protection at the dog park. Staff has done an outstanding job of not just meeting that request, but really exceeding it with a remarkable structure and protection. I know that not all of you get to the dog park every day. In fact, some of you may not get to the dog park at all, so I thought I would bring the dog park to you. Maybe. Which clicker is it? Nope. Not either clicker. There we go. This was done in 2 parts. There's a magnificent shelter that was built back in the summer. And you can see the large pilings that are holding it up. Nice roof. It spans the fence that separates the large and small dog parks. And you see that some protection has been added on the north and the east side to break the wind. That's clear vinyl, fairly heavy duty, and it is doing an outstanding job. I was there, I don't know, maybe last week, and a woman came and said, "Somebody told me you were responsible for this." And I said, no, the town, I mean, I certainly spoke to the town about it, but the town executed. He said, "Well, thank you very much." Apparently she and a friend had come on one of the rainiest days that we had back in December. They were sure they were going to get soaked. They came to the park, they found the shelter, and they found it wrapped in vinyl. They were able to stay dry, and they just had a remarkable experience. And the reaction from all the folks that I come in contact with is exactly the same, that the shelter has been a great boon in protecting from rain, and that the wintertime wind protection really does a good job. I was over there yesterday afternoon when it was blowing about 30 out of the northeast, and you could get behind that shelter and you were completely out of the wind and able to stay much longer with our canine friends. In that picture, you can also see the deconstructed granite surface that's been installed around the entrance, sort of as a play area. And I can tell you that's doing a very good job as well. It's held up better than I think anybody expected it to. It's a bit dusty when it's dry, but overall it was a really, really good choice for the surface. And in the last 18 months, the town has added new benches as well as the shelter, and the dog park really has come a long way. Staff has done an outstanding job. And that's why, because people use it a lot. On the left, you can see the Picardy Spaniel Abby with Kevin. And in the back, you can see the mighty Quinn Walker Hound, who owns the park pretty much. And then, of course, me with my beautiful Mr. Finn. I mentioned staff, and I can't tell you how good a job public facility staff does at taking care of the park. I'll give you a simple example. You all know that it gets cold. Of course, the park has water on both sides, which not every dog park does, amazingly. And some folks come from out of town sometimes are surprised that there's water there. When the temperature drops below freezing at night, of course, we're worried about that water freezing, and staff comes and they turn off the water. That's not the remarkable part. The remarkable part is as soon as the day of, the morning, that temperature is going to stay above freezing, staff is there turning that water back on, so the first folks who were there at the park that morning have water, don't have to bring their own water. Really paying attention to the park. It's mowed regularly. We had a call about the back gate. That got fixed quickly, so real kudos to the public facilities director and staff for the job they're doing for the dogs. That is Findy, and I'm not sure about the dog in the middle, but that's Mexico standing up, and they are the ones whom we really do this for. So again, thank you all very much for the great work you've done on the dog park.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mueller.
Thank you.
Good morning. John Kenny, 337 Nags Way Court. I just had a couple things that, questions or suggestions you might say. We have twice a week trash collection. I don't know if you've all had looked at knocking it down to once a week in the off-season, which would save the town money and give the maintenance staff time to maintain and take care of the maintenance of the trucks so there's no breakdowns come summertime. I know it cut down on the fees charged at the dump, the dumping fee. Myself and my family, we could easily manage once a week pickup. The other thing, the repaving of the Bill Dunes area. When I first moved into the area, it was a public or private street, and they needed repaving. We're assessed a fee, all the property owners, to have it repaved and to be taken over. Water lines were replaced, and I think it's time for the town to look at possibly repaving it. I know, I understand it's a pretty expensive deal, but if we start looking at it now, I think it'd be a good idea before it gets too bad. And that's about all. One more thing with the beaches. I don't know if you've been to the beach lately, but it's eroding very quickly. There's been some ideas about some reefs, putting in some reefs. I know one other property owner had a friend from Hawaii who lived in New Zealand, and he was the one that built a reef in New Zealand. And he sent this other person the information on the reef. Basically, the reef is made out of a double sandbag, and it's anchored offshore, which would break down the wave action. And it'll also make good surf break, so we could get more people, surfers in here year-round. So, you know, it might cost a little bit more money. It'd save the beach and maybe extend our season for surfers a little bit longer. That's about all I have. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
I'll provide, if I can get up with him, I don't know if he's in someplace warm or not, but he had the information from the guy that built the reef in New Zealand. And it's pretty thick book, so. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kenny. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board? If not, at this time, we will conclude the public comment session.
We normally don't respond to public comment, but I am going to speak to a couple of things this morning. I appreciate Mayor Mueller coming forward this morning. You know very well, boards don't get much praise. And we really appreciate you acknowledging the work of staff. We do have an amazing staff. They do a great job. That we hope, our goal is to provide that kind of quality experience wherever you are in the town of Nags Head. Glad it's happening at the dog park. It happens at the beach accesses in the season, and so that's our goal. Appreciate that. And the other thing is, we do have a schedule for repaving, and I think if staff could share that with the speaker, with John, that would be helpful, because Villa Dunes is on there. So thank you very much. That brings us to the consent agenda, which you have before you, and a motion would be in order.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. That brings us to our first of, I believe, 2 public hearings this morning. And so I will turn this over to Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at this time, we're going to begin the quasi-judicial hearing to consider a special use site plan review submitted by Quibel and Associates and Beacon Architecture and Design PLLC for the construction of a trade center on property located on Lot 2A of the Charles Seneath subdivision. This is behind TW's Bait and Tackle. As the board will recall, when sitting as a quasi-judicial body, the board must follow certain special rules for the process. Your key responsibilities are, first, to determine contested facts and to apply the legal standards to the facts. You may apply only the standards already contained in the town's ordinances. You are not permitted to change or modify those standards during this hearing or as part of your decision in this case. In conducting this hearing, certain safeguards must be instituted in order to give the applicant a fair hearing. The applicant has the right to cross-examine witnesses and offer rebuttal evidence. The procedure of the ordinance must be followed. The Board of Commissioners members may question any witness at any time during the hearing. Questions from the floor will not be permitted except by cross-examination from the parties. A member must not vote on the application if the outcome of the matter being considered is reasonably likely to have a direct and substantial financial impact on the member. If such a direct and substantial financial conflict exists, the member should disclose it and ask to be excused from consideration of this matter. If any of the members present have had any contact with anyone prior to this hearing in which the particulars of this application were discussed, or if you have received letters, email messages, phone calls, or other communications from anybody concerning this matter prior to this hearing, you must disclose those communications. You must base your decision on this application entirely on the facts presented during this hearing and disregard the particulars discussed with the applicant or the other party. Also, a member must base his decision on the evidence presented during this hearing. Any member who has developed a predetermined opinion or bias on the outcome of this application before this hearing must not participate in it. Your decision must be based on competent, substantial, and material evidence properly entered into the record of this hearing. Crucial facts used to determine the outcome of this hearing must be based on sworn statements made by witnesses during the hearing. While you may be presented before or during the hearing with copies of unsworn statements contained in letters, emails, and so forth, such unsworn evidence can only be used to corroborate or supplement other sworn evidence presented during the hearing. Unsworn evidence, such as letters or emails, cannot be used as the sole basis for your decision. So at this time, if any member needs to recuse themselves from this hearing for any of the reasons that I have explained, or if you need to disclose any ex parte communications that you've received prior to this hearing, this would be the opportunity to do so. All right. All right, so at this time, we'll begin the evidentiary presentation. First, all of those people who may present evidence regarding this application, either for the applicant or on behalf of the town, should approach the town clerk, who will administer the oath.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
All right. Well, at this time, we'll begin the evidentiary presentation with the staff's analysis presented by the Planning and Development Director, Kelly Wyatt.
Thank you. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I've gone ahead and just displayed the site plan for what we're going to be talking about today on the screen, so you can have that in front of you as I go through the staff report. As noted, this is a special use permit site plan review for construction of a trade center on the vacant property behind TW's Bait and Tackle. You've seen this site plan before. The initial special use site plan approval for the trade center was reviewed and approved by the Nags Board of Commissioners on November 2nd, 2022. The 2022 approval was not a vested right, so the site plan approval expired 1 year from the date of the approval, meaning that it expired on November 2nd, 2023. I've included section 4.15 of the UDO in your packet that speaks to the time limits for site plan, zoning permit, and building permit approval, and the timeline for getting your permits. Just in that, I would note that since that time, the applicant has been unable to pull a building permit for the project. So that is what has caused the permit approval to expire. Given that this is the same application that had been presented previously, we sent it back through the technical review committee. Everyone had a chance to review it again. Planning, fire, police, public services, as well as the town engineer have all looked at this submittal and found it to be consistent and still in compliance with your previous November 2nd, 2022, with the approval from 2022. There have been no changes to the applicable codes for each respective department over the past year that would affect this new submittal. Therefore, staff recommends approval of the special use site plan review as it has been submitted. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Additionally, Ms. Tambone from Quibel and Associates is available on behalf of the applicant, should you have questions for her.
All right, does the board have any questions for Ms. Wyatt? Does the applicant have any questions for Ms. Wyatt? Anything else, Kelly?
That's it.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Now, did the applicant intend to introduce any information regarding this application?
No new additional information has been
Okay.
provided.
Does the board wish to receive any other evidence regarding this application before you begin your deliberations? All right. At this time, we will conclude the evidentiary presentation, and the board may begin its deliberations. I will point out that in order to approve this, you do need, in order to approve it, you would need to make those special findings that are listed in the staff report.
All right, thank you. I do want to ask Director Wyatt a question.
Okay.
This is not about the application itself, because this has happened a couple of times recently that I've been aware of. How much does vested right cost?
$500.
Okay. And does it require any additional work other than checking a different box on the application form?
No, staff goes through
Okay.
the same review process.
Okay, all right. It's happened a couple of times.
Yes.
I just tell people it's worth $500. It's worth the $500. Not to have to do it again. So, board, any questions, comments?
Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
Codes.
Yep. So then a motion would be in order to approve it with the findings of fact.
I make that motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second incorporating the referenced findings of fact. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Thank you very much. That brings us to our second public hearing, and Director Wyatt will stay there, and Mr. Whitey will continue.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. At this time, the board will open the public hearing to consider amendments to the town's code and various sections of the code in order to establish multifamily dwelling development regulations. This is a legislative matter, and therefore sworn testimony is not required, but we'll begin with the presentation of staff's analysis by Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. As you noted, I am here to present an extensive amount of work that the Planning Board has undertaken over the past 8 months as it relates to incorporating the multifamily dwelling use back into the town's Unified Development Ordinance. I will go through a timeline very briefly because it was in the board packet as well as the information that was provided on the website. And I'll try to put the pertinent sections of the code up on the screen as I go through this. But in the first couple of months where staff was working with the planning board on this, we spent that sorting out the issues and the inconsistencies in the prior verbiage for multifamily dwellings, doing an analysis of those issues and trying to determine how we rectify the inconsistencies that were determined. From there, we started drafting new definitions of the terms multifamily dwelling and townhouse. There's several new definitions, but that's where we started out. At that point, it was just a draft, and over the next 8 months, those definitions continue to evolve, as well as new definitions being proposed. The table of activities, which is section 6.6 in the UDO, that was amended to, I'll pull that up, to remove the townhouse use, as it was agreed that a townhouse use was a form of multifamily development. So there was no need to keep that in there. In addition, it was the consensus to remove the townhouse use and subsequently the multifamily use from the SPD 20 district as well. So you can see from section 6.6 on the screen how we also have the strike through under the SPD 20. The SPD 20 district encompasses Villa Dunes Drive, Jockey's Ridge State Park, and North Ridge Estates subdivision. The SPD 20 district, it's a special plan development that's created to permit development compatible with the environmentally sensitive nature of the district, and it's a district that promotes low-density residential development. So with that being said, the planning board and planning staff were in agreement that this likely was not an appropriate zoning district for multifamily development to be located within. That being said, as you all may know, the Villas townhome community is currently within the SPD 20 district. And removing townhouse from the SPD 20 would make the villas a non-conforming use. But as you also may recall, as we went through the C5 amendments, we drafted new language for non-conforming uses within the code. And that new language states that any non-conforming use, it's going to be able to be repaired, maintained, replaced with an identical or similar structure regardless of the value of the project. So anything that were to occur at the villas, if this ordinance were to be adopted, it could be repaired, replaced, maintained in the exact same footprint that exists today. It can even be expanded as long as those expansions meet the current code in terms of lot coverage, setbacks, height, architecture, etc. We did draft a definition for townhouse because there is a townhouse district within the village, and nothing that we've done as part of this would address or involve the SPDC Village at Nags Head townhome district. So we did keep that definition in there. In early August, the Planning Board and Board of Commissioners held a joint workshop to discuss the progress of the amendment. The conversation included discussion about deed restrictions. We talked about that quite a bit. And their ability to control occupancy of multifamily housing to either long-term use or use by members of the local workforce. Notable takeaways from that meeting was the consensus that multifamily should be allowed within the C2 General Commercial Zoning District and upon lots which front on US Highway 158. Density and lot coverage considerations will be key, and that the town would want to ensure that any project that was going to be developed would be done so at an appropriate density and to include adequate green space. There was agreement that we wanted to allow townhouse-style development, which is going to be characterized by shared vertical walls, and not apartment-style development, which are going to be units constructed on multiple floors, separated by shared vertical walls and shared horizontal ceilings, floors, etc. And it was consensus that we wanted any new multifamily units to be for the local workforce and not to be affiliated with salary or income. The planning board and the board of commissioners were also in agreement that reintroducing a higher density form of housing in Nags Head should only be done to create housing opportunities for workforce and or residents, and not to increase the supply of vacation rentals. In order to ensure that the units would not become vacation rentals, or short-term rentals, as many people call them, deed restrictions would have to be implemented. At the planning board's August meeting, staff provided a presentation of all the properties that would meet the current proposed criteria for multifamily, which was in a C2 zoning district and abutting US Highway 158. And using the standard that had previously been listed in our code, which was the density standard, which was you can have 3 units for your first 26,000 square feet of lot area, and then 1 additional unit for every 3,500 square feet of lot area. So when we did this, based upon the lot area that we were pulling from the Dare County parcel cards, we were able to put together a presentation that showed how many lots would actually meet the criteria, and based upon that lot area, how many units could actually be obtained. It was surprising to both planning staff and the planning board to see the number of properties that met the criteria and the potential number of units that could be attained. The planning board asked staff to put together information on what varying that density standard would look like. And for instance, instead of using that 3,500 square feet of lot area per additional unit, what would 4,500 look like? What would 5,500 look like? So at the following meeting, we came back with that information. Another notable item from that meeting was the consensus that long-term occupancy, and I'm sorry, I'll go back up here to the definitions while I'm doing this, that long-term occupancy should mean that the resident resides in the dwelling a minimum of 90 days, and that's tied back to the standards used in the Vacation Rental Act. They felt as though 90 days may still help out summer workers and lifeguards, whereas if you were to say long-term was a 6-month lease, that would preclude summer workers and our lifeguards. At their September meeting, the planning board requested that staff look into creating 2 types of development options. And this was one of the bigger things that staff undertook as part of this process. I think we're all proud and very happy with how it came out. But what happened here is that we came up with what we consider large multifamily development and what we're calling small multifamily development. The large option, that's more consistent with what was previously in the code. Still 26,000 square feet for your first 3 units, instead of 3,500 for every unit after, we imposed 4,500 for every unit thereafter. For that, there's going to be a cap of 60 units, and this type of development would be restricted to townhouse style only. So those units separated by vertical walls. The second option that we drafted is a small multifamily option where the standards are notably less stringent than the large multifamily category. And the hope was that the lessening of these standards would incentivize small multifamily. This option would still require that the subject property be zoned C2, general commercial, and that it still be adjacent to US 158. But the minimum lot size for your first 3 units is going to be 16,000 square feet. And that's consistent with our minimum lot size for large single-family dwellings. The proposed setbacks for the small multifamily designation is going to be that of what we require in the R1, the low-density residential zoning district. So the big thing there is 12-foot side yard setbacks. And the small option would be able to accommodate both townhouse-style development as well as apartment-style development, and it would be capped at a maximum of 6 units. So 60 units for your large multifamily and 6 units for the small multifamily option. As proposed, both the small and large multifamily options would be permitted via the special use process. Building design variations would be required. Compliance with sketch plan requirements would be required. Just a reminder, so sketch plan right now is really associated with only projects greater than 5,000 square feet in area. But it's an opportunity to get the design, the layout, the architecture in front of the planning board early before a lot of time and energy is invested into developing it out, so that you're getting input very early on. So the idea was that any development for both large and small would use that sketch plan process so that the planning board's getting an opportunity to look at it before too much energy is invested. Also, it was consensus to list the large multifamily as a high impact use. That pertains to the required buffering. So should any large multifamily be located adjacent to a residential zoning district, those buffering requirements are going to be increased. That high impact use is going to trigger the commercial transitional protective yard, which is 25 feet in width and 3 rows of plantings. So that would be notable. That's the highlights. I'm happy to go through every line of this if you wish, but those are the primary points. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to look at it, and I'm hopeful that I can answer any questions that you may have. I did note that our planning board chair, Megan Vaughn, is also in the audience today as well.
All right, does the board have any questions for Ms. Wyatt?
I do.
Yes, sir.
Kelly, in the course of the discussions here, why townhouses specifically? And was there any discussion about the relative visual impact or bulk of townhouses versus flats? Was there any discussion about the relative cost of construction for different types? Was there any discussion about accessibility for those who might have a handicap and need to live on one floor as opposed to a multi-floor unit?
Yeah, I mean, there was some conversation. We'll try to address every question that you asked there. I think visually, the town preferred the townhouse style, the townhouse design of shared vertical walls when it came to a large development. So groupings or clusters of 6 townhomes in a row, as opposed to one large apartment-style building. And again, we're talking about just the aesthetics of the buildings themselves. Noting that apartment style was included as part of the small multifamily. There's a section in here about architecture where we actually state that any multifamily development should incorporate varying building designs such as habitable area, stories, etc. So I don't know that any part of this would exclude one-story living. I think ADA accessibility would just be inherent in any type of development, that a certain number of the units would have to be developed to ADA standards. I'm not sure if that answers all of your questions. I'm happy to answer again.
The one other question was about relative constructability or cost between a flat versus townhouse style.
We did not consider cost.
Okay, all right. Was there any discussion or input from anybody about whether 100% deed restriction was financeable or fundable on the market, or whether it would have to be built, with the developer's own funds?
No, that was not discussed. What was discussed is that at that joint workshop, there was consensus that we did not want a multi-family unit to be developed if that unit was going to go back to a vacation rental or a short-term rental.
Right.
And so deed restriction was the only way to address that, to ensure that it did not become another vacation rental. So we didn't discuss the financeability of it, rather we used what we had heard from the joint workshop.
Okay, all right. And the last question was, how was the percentage reserved for workforce achieved? That percentage of workforce versus non-workforce?
The 60%, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
That was just a conversation among staff and the planning board. There was no special reason to land on 60, other than that we certainly wanted the majority of the units to be dedicated to workforce, because I think that's why we're having the conversation to begin with, was to provide for workforce housing. So it's a minimum of 60 is what the ordinance says. So a minimum of 60%. Of course, if it were 70 or 80, that would be wonderful. We also wanted to acknowledge that there's going to be people who aren't part of the local workforce, who perhaps elderly people, or I can't envision every scenario. So we wanted to allow them an opportunity to be there as well, so long as they met the requirement of workforce.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Board, any others? Questions?
I had some of the same questions, but you addressed those. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Wyatt? Anything else, Kelly?
No, sir.
All right, thank you very much. Does anybody else wish to comment on this proposed set of amendments? Yes, sir.
Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Mr. Garman. My name is John Chenoweth. I'm here to represent Nags at 9987 and the Outer Banks Hotel Group, also known as the owners of the Tar Heel and the Kelly's property. I've given some talking points that I want to share with you. Today, they want to object to this hearing and insist that it be delayed further for the reasons I'm about to convey to you. First, they feel there's been lack of proper notice and lack of full disclosure of the proposed ordinance to the public. They also believe that you have not followed the text amendment procedures. They have retained counsel who has reviewed previous recordings and meetings and have found numerous omissions in the procedures, as well as language that proves that there's in the ordinance is discriminatory towards the Kelly's property. They also believe that the deed restriction is a legal restraint of the alienation of the property. And in January of 2023, they submitted a project to staff for 57-unit townhomes community at the Kelly property. On the 27th, staff returned comments in writing that the townhome is an allowed use. The density of 57 units was compliant with the ordinance. And now you're proposing a density reduction that will only allow 45 units on that property. You will restrict the pool of buyers that will be allowed to use and purchase the property as a second home or as a short-term rental. And lastly, the architectural requirements are in conflict with the new state statutes, HB 488. So in closing, they want to encourage you to table this hearing and seek dialogue with the owners of the Kelly property to find a better solution than what's proposed in this text amendment. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Good morning, I'm Duke Garrity, Government Affairs Director for the Outer Banks Home Builders Association. I'm going to read something today that I wrote. I had a lot of questions, a lot of things, too much to come up, and I wouldn't be able to remember them all while I'm up here, and until I sit in my seat again and say, I forgot this and I forgot that. So I would try and read. You're going to have to be patient with me. My brain and my eyes and my mouth never get coordinated. So I'm going to do my best here. For the last 8 months, the planning staff, planning board, commissioners, town manager have been working very hard on a comprehensive amendment to clarify multifamily development in Nags Head. It's been a lengthy process trying to coordinate a much-needed workforce housing amendment with standard residential guidelines. I fear the results will be that no such development will take place in the town due to the complexity of the amendment ordinance and the costs that go along with it. It was very hard for me to stand here and take 8 months' worth of work and critique it into 3 minutes. But, so I did come up with just a few of these concerns. I have another concern is that right now, Dare County has formed a multifamily workforce, and I don't even call it, just calling it a housing task force to deal with this issue. They've included the municipalities surrounding the area. I would ask the town to wait and see what some of the qualifications, and there's a lot of talent sitting around that table, and to see what comes out of this. I don't know how long this task force is going to be working, how long it'll take, but I know they don't want it. They want to put a cap on it and an end to it. What I had hoped to see, the construction of suitable rental development for those who may never have the resources to own a home, those just starting out in their professional life, and professional people who come here to work and want to rent something nice in a nice area, in a nice home, in multifamily, until they decide where they want to locate permanently. We can all agree that these dwellings should not be utilized for short-term vacation rentals. We do have enough of that. But in Dare County, the highest and best use of a property is to rent them out for short-term rentals, and that has created the affordability problem we have always had here. To try and keep the construction prices down is the challenge. After reviewing the proposed ordinance, the placing of mandatory aesthetic controls and strict density requirements raises the cost of construction and therefore the rental expense also, and does not add to the enjoyment of the living quarters. We are all aware of the lack of suitable properties that are available for multifamily, and restricting these units to the front on the bypass is probably one of the most expensive property that we have, except for the ocean front, and then requiring an extra 4,500 square feet of lot area for anything over 6 units. Very confusing. First look, it would take engineers, and we know these are big projects. We have to be careful with them. some of the requirements were, if you have multi-buildings, you would have to have 40-foot separation between buildings. Not allowing the rear of one building to be for the face of another building. So if we try to put them in columns, you can't look at it. If you had two buildings, parking area in between them, as we've seen, that's not allowed in this ordinance. I've attended almost all the planning board meetings, and it's been almost impossible to take the bits and pieces of each meeting and put them in some type of chronicle order. I have asked for a complete ordinance in one package, but was unable to obtain it until last week for review. I would have liked to go over this ordinance with our legislative committee and with some of the developers who have built multifamily and have a whole lot more experience than I do. A planning board meeting is not the proper venue for input, since there's a 3-minute public comment at the beginning of the meeting and no public input is able to be put in during the rest of the meeting, so I would have to wait until the next month to comment on it. I do appreciate that the planning board chair did give me time to voice my opinions when I asked or if I wanted some clarification. In the interest of time, I hope we will postpone the vote on this today until the discussion can take place of what the Outer Banks home builders feels are important issues, and that could be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garrity. Would anybody else like to comment? Yes, sir.
Good morning. My name is Basil Belches. My wife and I live at 3521 South Memorial in Nags Head. While I'm up here, I'd like to take a quick second to thank the town for a couple of recent initiatives before I get into the hearing part. These initiatives that are forward-thinking and community-minded. The C-Click Fix program that's in place now for reporting various issues. That's great. I've used it and appreciate it, so thank you for that. And also the town's recent efforts to get the community involved in the residential insurance plan increases in North Carolina, and also the NC Rules Commission and the AEC issues and the possible impact on Jockey's Ridge. My neighbors and I have been involved in both of those and appreciate the town's lead. So thanks to everybody in the town and the staff that worked on that. As far as this hearing, I'm in favor of approving these text amendments as written. I've spoken numerous times with you about needing to keep multifamily housing out of non-commercial and historic character areas of the town, but I was never against multifamily housing in general. The way this amendment is set up with its requirements that Kelly's already gone over, so I don't need to list them, it makes sense. The amendment would allow appropriate multifamily housing in appropriate locations with appropriate requirements regarding the tenants. So thank you to the planning board and the staff that worked on this, and thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Belches. Is there any further comment? Anything from the planning board? All right, does the board wish to receive any other information regarding the proposed amendments before you begin your deliberations?
I would like to ask for a clarification.
All right.
Kelly, do you? I forgot to ask this earlier. It was not clear to me. I think the text maybe is clear enough, but the intent of restricting units from facing the rear of other units, was that just an aesthetic consideration? Where did that come from, and what was the discussion about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, actually looking back at the town's multifamily regulations, I think it was in '87, had that standard in there, and it was simply for aesthetics and appearance to not have the front of one unit looking at the rear of another unit.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Anything further that the board would like to receive? If not, at this time, we will conclude the public hearing, and the board may deliberate on the proposed text amendments.
I do want to note that they were not delivered verbally this morning, but there were comments from the Board of Realtors Representative Donna Creef that all of the board received, as well as the clerk, and they will be part of the record. Thank you. John? Bob? Any?
Yes, sir.
Comments, questions? Where are you on this morning?
I mean, obviously, a lot of work and a lot of effort has gone into this. And the reason it was taken out in the first place is because there were obvious problems with it, because the goals of yesterday are not the goals of today. And I think that the staff has done a good job with it. And I like the deed restrictions. I like the sketch process, so you don't have to invest a lot of money before you get deep into the planning process, and I think that helps move the planning process along as well, too. So, I mean, I'd like to commend the staff on, and the planning board on the job they've done. I like it.
All right. Thank you. Commissioner Brinkley.
Just a lot of work has gone into it by the planning board and town staff, and I appreciate that. I have heard from the person in the building community that this will not work. And I have personally, not speaking for the others, I have no interest in adopting an ordinance that's going to be so restrictive and so cumbersome that they're not going to build units. I have no interest at all. When we had a stormwater ordinance that was just that way, we formed a committee and we worked with the home builders. And the home builders didn't get everything we wanted. They gave us input on what would make our stormwater ordinance better while still keeping our values. And that what we have now is a stormwater ordinance that's not perfect, but it's far better than what it was. I would like to involve the building community, and no, not just the owner of Kelly's property. That's not the reason I'm saying it, but involve people from the building community to give input to see how we can make this ordinance without selling out our standards and what we want in town, to see if there's a way to have it to where it would be more able to come to fruition when we would have a project. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Megan?
Well, first I want to thank the planning board and the town staff for the amount of work that you guys have put in on this. I had the privilege of serving on the planning board, obviously, and getting to work on this. One thing I want to kind of touch back, when I was on the planning board and we first talked about why we needed to do this, the thing that kept coming up was year-round housing and workforce housing. I don't want to say affordable housing because I know that's a murky area, but that was the need, that was the why, that was the what. So when we worked on it on the planning board, that was the direction we took with it. And I like what I see in front of me because I feel that it answers those needs and doesn't allow ways that this could turn into short-term rental with the deed restrictions. I understand hearing feedback that it's a complex document, but I think those complexities are details that need to be in there. And if you're a neighbor next to one of these possible developments that might come to fruition, those complexities, those details are going to be really important to you. So I like the document I see in front of me. I echo, Duke, you made a great point when you said, you know, this type of project is a big deal and it needs to be taken special care. And I agree. I think the possibility of a big project like this does need to have special care, and that's what I see in this ordinance, and I like it because of that.
All right. You know, there is some good and bad in this, and I think, you know, the board said yes, we want this to be for workforce housing. We don't want any additional short-term rentals. But I think at the end of the day, we also have to just not put an ordinance on the books without any consideration of whether it's actually going to happen or not. And I think that's the little piece that's missing. I feel as though, you know, and it's not the fault of us, it's not the fault of the planning board. I feel like there's information that we don't have, that we're operating in too much of a vacuum in terms of not what we want to happen in terms of the housing and workforce, but what will actually happen when we enact an ordinance and whether we can get some housing to be built. I mean, the things that this ordinance accomplishes that I really like, creating units for the long-term rather than short-term occupancy is good. Housing for the local workforce is good. I really like the small project option. It's something that I think that we've needed for a while. I think a lot of this is a right fit for the town of Nags Head, where I think it misses the mark, and I think if we want a result, if we actually want to accomplish housing the workforce and having some long-term rentals for them, I think it has to be financially viable. I think there has to be some discussion about that. I think it has to be manageable without undue burdens and unenforceable provisions. And I think it does have to be flexible, and you know, whether those percentages that we have are right or not, you know, I don't know. But we do need the flexibility. I think there's some there for people who need, who may be in transition and don't want to own a house, who, you know, single parents, all the kinds of people who need that option. And I appreciate that, you know, we're not going to read her comments, Ms. Creef, but she appreciated the board's work and its emphasis on the housing, the workforce housing, but with the caveat that it may be too cumbersome to actually facilitate that kind of development. And so I have reservations about the ordinance as we have it. I think there's work to be done. I think we've moved a long way. We've moved the ball a long way. But I just think there's information that we just don't have about whether the ordinance can actually be put to work. So I will ask whether, you know, heard it from Commissioner Brinkley, so I'll offer it. When we had the the stormwater ordinance, that we just it was like a tar baby. We couldn't let go of the thing. It just kept getting revised and revised, and constant complaining from the community about it and the way it made people's yards look and whether it was doing any good or not. And that committee helped clean that up. And again, it's not perfect, but it did move it a long way. And you know, we don't hear about it anymore. We really don't hear about the residential stormwater issue anymore. So I would, you know, and this is important. I don't know how urgent this is at this point, as long as this has been out of the ordinance. I would ask the board if the board is amenable to, without, you know, the board is the board, and the board will decide ultimately at the end what we do or what we don't do. Would the board be open to a small task force that involves the development community and the business owners that would work on this in the way that we did on stormwater and provide our board with the information that I think we need to give better guidance to the planning board?
Mayor Cahoon, I would be amenable to that, but I would want to see equal representation, not just from home builders, but from citizens, stakeholders, neighbors that will be affected by this, because the quality of life in Nags Head is just as important as the builder's paychecks.
I absolutely agree with that.
Just as important as what?
It's just important as the builder's paychecks and financing. Yep. We need to make sure that.
Yes, it is. And what we want to do is we want those projects we want, and we want them built. And we want them to work. We want them to work for the citizens. We want them to work for everybody. And I'm not prepared to name any names today. I think we do want to, absolutely want residents, business community as well in that group. So I would ask, we don't have a mid-month meeting planned, so we would not meet until, do we have a reason for a mid-month meeting?
We don't have a mid-month meeting planned, but we could have a mid-month meeting if we want to.
I don't want to do it just to appoint this group, this working group. I think it can wait. And so what I would suggest is that that the board move to appoint a working group, and that we receive a recommendation from staff based on input from the board and nominations from the board, and that we staff that task force at our next meeting and give them a mission, a charge, which we can also work on between now and that meeting, and give them a timeline.
I think a timeline is very important. I would hate to see this thing, like you said before, drag on and drag on. I mean, there's a lot of people that are waiting on this to be put into fruition, so.
Yeah, I agree. I do want to hear from our business community. I do want to hear from our residents.
Could I say one thing real quick? The, you know, if we come back in a month to appoint the working group, we'll sort of ask the board to think about some maybe philosophical preferences or values that you would like to pass down to the working group. I mean, are there things that you strongly want them to consider as a value when they put this together? For instance, I think that the idea of deed restricting for workforce and long-term housing, you know, I think that needs to be established by the board to go to the working group, because if that's just left open-ended, they're going to come back and say, the deed restrictions don't work, and, you know, we can't get financing, and then just the whole thing becomes unraveled. And I think they need to know if the board feels strongly about those kinds of things, you know, as they put their work together. I'm just asking the board to come back maybe in a month and have something
Yes.
to give to the working group.
Yeah, I think we should do, absolutely, we should be able to do that.
The other thing, we might, would it be possible to have, just so that we're not going back and forth and wasting time in terms of legal, because some concerns have been brought up with legally if this works, when we're talking about deed restrictions. And then also the financing piece, I don't know if it's outside of the box, but to just go by one party's vision of how the financing works, is it possible to get some banking expertise in here that's non-biased?
I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I think that's too often what we're missing, and I think, yes, I think that straightforward,
That's
real
not involved.
assessment that's not involved. It's not a project, it's not a builder, it's somebody telling us, yes, we can do that, and make that kind of thing happen for the community. Yes, absolutely.
And I do believe that we got legal opinion from our attorney about deed restrictions, that they were indeed allowed.
What about the additional architectural restrictions? That was the question that came up that I intended to ask you.
If you consider this to be a commercial development, that's permissible.
Okay. All right. Right, okay.
And for one more question for participation on the committee, in the past committees, we've had participation from a board member and a
Yes.
planning board member. Would we want to do the same?
Yes, we would.
Okay.
We would. So there would be one or two commissioners, there would be one or two planning board members, and then there would be the community, including the business interest, that would be there. And I think we can settle that exact mix when we have kind of know who we want to participate.
Okay.
John, you were about to say something.
I was just thinking about the practical issues of having a committee that's real large and making sure you always have a quorum. But I think you could have these meetings that would allow for some public participation as well. So the committee wouldn't necessarily have to be that large to be able to facilitate the generation of comment and input.
True. I mean, I think that committee that we had that finally settled the stormwater was staff and a couple of commissioners. Maybe there was a planning board member in that group. There was.
There was on the stormwater.
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe it was just commissioners. But
No,
it
it's
was.
septic health.
It was pretty small. It was about 6 or 7 people, I think.
But we saw input from people that had experienced the ordinance,
Right.
building, you know. saw input
Tried to
from
work with it. That's right.
And people with citizens flooding experience that have been affected by fill.
Yes,
and stuff
yes.
like that.
So John, the form of motion here is, are we tabling this?
I think I think the idea is to table it unless you want to just vote to deny it, but then you'd have to go all the way back through the process. So I think it would be better to table at this time.
Yes. So I would ask for a motion to table and recommendations from staff with board input for a small working group that will then receive a charge and a schedule at our next meeting.
I'll make that motion.
Okay. Can I get a second?
Second?
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you. I think that brings us, we have a 10:30 specific. It's 10:15. Can we get will our 10:30 folks be available if we take about a 10-minute break or so at this point? Go ahead and do that. All right, then the board will recess for about 10 minutes. So we have a 10:30 time-specific item, which is the presentation from the Fire Planning Committee, and Deputy Chief Height. There you are.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners again. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about what we feel is a staffing need in the fire department. We also appreciate the opportunity that we had to work with the staffing group to talk about our staffing. That committee and group consisted of Commissioner Brinkley, past Mayor Bob Muller, Meade Gwynn, who's a resident of Nags Head, of course, Town Manager Garman, Deputy Town Manager Miller, Human Resources Director Milky, and then, of course, the Chief and myself. We were able to meet numerous times and look at a lot of information regarding our staffing, and again, we appreciate that opportunity. This started back in the 2022 Board of Commissioners retreat, where we started discussing a possible staffing need for the fire department. And then in September of '23, we presented a memo to you all in hopes of getting this staffing committee work group together. Over that time period from October, I believe, until just recently, that group met at least once a month to look at a lot of data and a lot of information to try to understand the needs of the fire department, but also the outlook from the community as well, and what that perfect staffing, if possible, looked like. So we appreciate that work that went into that. See if we can get our clicker moving forward here. So one of the things we talked about, and that was important, and why should we even be considering staffing is a lot of things have changed, of course, in Nags Head. We have not done anything to increase or to change our staffing levels since Station 21 in South Nags Head was brought online back in 2006. I think we can all agree that it takes an appropriate number of staff to respond to any emergency or any call for service. So once again, in meeting with the committee, we were able to kind of identify some of those things and some of the issues that we see and work together for a common goal, we hope. I want to talk to you a little bit about what we currently have, just so everybody can maybe hopefully gain the picture of what we have on duty and available to us. Of course, everyone knows we have two fire stations, Station 16 across the street and Station 21 in South Nags Head. The chief and myself are stationed out of Station 16. We also have an office manager. We have 3 fire captains who are shift work, 3 lieutenants, 3 driver operators or engineers, and 3 firefighters. Station 21, you have the 3 fire captains, 3 lieutenants, engineers or driver operators, and 3 firefighters again. Each of those is divided up amongst 3 shifts, and you end up with a staffing of 8 per day of those, which goes to 6, which we'll talk about a little bit further here in just a moment. A typical response and what's available to respond each day for any emergency. On the left, you'll see what's called a quint or a ladder truck. That is, and each of these is basically staffed the same. On the right, you'll see what we call an engine. Some people call it a pumper. Each of those apparatus is equipped with a driver operator, an officer, whether it be a captain or a lieutenant, and then 2 firefighters. That staffing can be reduced to 3, which means a combination of that group due to vacation, sick leave, and any other types of leave that might occur. A little bit about once they arrive on scene, what occurs. And depending upon the scene, all of this can change. A typical, if we were going on a structure fire call, there might be a firefighter who has to get off the truck at a fire hydrant to help lay in a supply hose that then might have to walk forward. When the truck stops, the driver operator is doing his job or her job to get that truck set up, get the pumping gear, get the water supply established to help with hose lines. The officer typically would do what we call a walk around of a structure to understand what we have and where it might go. If we have a fourth firefighter on duty, that firefighter is then going up, seeing if we can get inside, seeing if they have to force a door, stretching a hose line, and then everybody works together for that same common goal as their other tasks come to an end. If we only have 3, of course, we're waiting for that person that was at the fire hydrant to come forward. So again, just a little bit of an overview about the worst case, the structure fire scenario, and what typically takes place with the staff and that's on scene. As the committee worked towards a common goal, you know, one of the things we begin to ask ourselves is, well, what says that a firefighter or a fire department needs X number of staffing, and what controls that? And to be honest, there's not many laws or standards and things like that that point you in the correct direction. One of the best resources out there is what we call NFPA 1710, or the National Fire Protection Association's standard for the organization and deployment of fire suppression operations, EMS operations, and other special operations by career fire departments. This isn't a law. However, NFPA standards are used from anything from code enforcement to, of course, response, and even to the way that fire trucks are built. It's pretty well recognized in the industry as a guideline of getting fire departments to a certain staffing level, response level, et cetera. So in looking at that standard and then considering what we use for staffing, we'll talk a little more about our current staffing levels. As I said earlier, there are 8 personnel a day that are assigned to each of 3 shifts who work 24 hours on and 48 hours off. We'll allow that staffing to be dropped to 6 per day. And again, that's due to any leave types such as sick time, overtime, et cetera, or sick time, vacation time, et cetera. We'll allow it to drop to 6 before we incur any overtime expenses. And sometimes we have to use overtime, of course, to ensure that we have that minimum of 6 because we don't drop below the 6 on the apparatus. Quick little numbers on overtime data. In the fiscal year 21-22, we utilized 878.4 overtime hours just to ensure that we had minimum staffing available at 6 personnel. In fiscal year 23-24, that number increased to 1,323.75 overtime hours. So with that being said, and with the discussion of dropping to 3 personnel, that NFPA standard does recommend that a fire department have 4 personnel on either a ladder truck or a pumper. So just something to keep in mind there. So as we start to look at that standard also, we look and we say it says fire call, or fires, EMS, and then special operations. And so what does that mean to the town? What does that mean to our organization? Because, you know, certainly there are some calls that are handled faster than others and maybe even don't require as many people. However, best case scenario is we keep those personnel as close to being together as we can. But with that being said, we attempted to use our data to pull out the numbers that we felt were extremely important, say for 23, that would have the most amount of people. And what we were able to pull out is there were 34 fire calls, 626 rescue and EMS calls, and 51 calls that what we call hazardous condition calls for service. And I don't have all those incident specifics with us today. That can be some data that we can provide you if needed. But that results in just a little over 60% of the annual call volume we feel like having the highest amount of people, so to speak, would result in a better outcome. So a little bit about some numbers, and just this is 21-22 staffing. Of course, daily staffing of 8, minimum staffing of 6. When we schedule our staff, they're scheduled for, if we were to schedule them 24 people, of course, which are their own duty staff, they're scheduled 2,600 hours a year, which ends up being 62,400 hours before they take any leave. The annual leave used back in 21-22 resulted in 7,167.9 hours, and 3,045 of this was due to sick leave conditions. These sick leaves, of course, could be illness, extended leave, maybe from FMLA, from an injury. And when we have these leaves, we, of course, sometimes we are able to fill them in sometimes with staff, not resulting in overtime. However, there is a time that this occurs that overtime is needed, which is what we saw in that other slide that talked about those overtime hours needed just to have the 6 are on duty. We don't plan our schedule around any overtime need. It's simply because we end up in a situation primarily due to sick leave or outages from sick, FMLA, things like that, that cause that overtime. And once again, just a quick 878.4 hours were needed just to ensure that minimum that year. Something else we considered was response areas. And as you know, as we talked about, we have 2 fire stations, of course, South Nags Head, and then, of course, Station 16 across the street. Consider this backwards, so to speak, because if you were to look at the left side of the screen, that's the north end of town. The right side of the screen is actually the south end of town. The white circle for each represents 5 miles from the fire station to the north to the south. And as you can see, the red mark right in the center is the station locations. And then, of course, the blue is the overlapping areas that you would consider. So we talk a little bit, and we try to always consider how we got here. The Nags Head Fire Department began way back in 1959. Of course, it began as a volunteer fire department. Through the years, transitioned into a combination department, and initially had 2 personnel per shift, and as it went on, it went from 2 to 3 and then 4 in the mid-90s, early 2000s. So Station 16, of course, across the street, responds to roughly 74% of the calls in the town. Highest number, of course, due to, as we all know, highest populated areas, not only in people, but the density of properties, as we know, is a larger concentration on the north end of town. This is illustrated also in the document that you have together that actually goes in and talks about the improved upon properties and the homes and the number of homes and the difference in the northern end of the town versus the south. With that being said, another portion of that NFPA document talks about the number of needed fire personnel on scene for a 2,000 square foot structure fire within an 8-minute response time. And they recommend 17 people. Now, that doesn't mean that Nags Head has to have 17 people. It means that we have the option, and we are thankful that we have some mutual aid partners coming to assist us as well, and all of those count. But we also know that most of our homes in Nags Head are larger than 2,000 square feet now. So take that into consideration, if you will. And this is kind of what we're talking about. I think we can all relate and look and realize that past times, how homes, businesses were a lot smaller in town. Maybe the standard was either a flat that was a couple of bedrooms, or even then moved on to a beach box that was usually a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. But now we're seeing the transition, and we know that homes are larger, housing more people. With that being said, and with that transition in time, we also know that our call volumes have increased, and that, of course, traffic's increased, which affects our response times, it respects the number of calls, and really the entire picture of our response scenario that we're looking at. As we consider that Station 16 response area, and once again, this is a 5-mile driving range from basically the station north and south, And the reason why we use 5 miles is because if we were to take into consideration the North Carolina insurance rating system standards, they allow a 5-mile driving distance from a station to be considered protected, which is one of the reasons why we point that out. Of course, I think everyone realizes that if we were to compare the north versus the south, once again, we have a higher population of homes and people there. Not to discount the north end of town at all, because again, we have a population there and we have substantial homes. But with that being said, the density of the population and the call volume is higher to the north for our service areas. And it's tough to see this map, I understand. We have these in, I think they're in your packet possibly, but we also have these in a form where you can see and understand, and we actually have numbers in your packet that talks about the number of those homes and properties in each end of the town. So if we were to look at call volumes, we would see that we run about 1,100 calls a year for service, and that's of all types of calls that we go to. If we were to go back in time and say 15, 20 years ago, those numbers were considerably less, anywhere around 700 calls a year, and I apologize for not putting those in the presentation. We tried to focus on some recent times here. 2019, 1,103 calls. 2020, we all know about COVID, and our call volume actually dropped for a time period. We were at 853, but then in 21, we were right back up again to 1,081. 22 at 1,017, and this year we've seen an increase of almost 9% to 1,168 calls. That 3-year average of fire calls, what that number is, and you have some data in your packet also that talks about the number of actual fires, not only in our town, but we compared it to North Carolina and the nation, and we're very close at 3.85%. Another data point to kind of consider here is that roughly 15% of our calls actually overlap, where we're on one call and we get called out to another call during that same time. Part of the staffing group, as we talked about, looked at leave. And we looked at numbers and actual numbers for several years, and these included vacation, sick leave, bereavement, school, FMLA. These numbers averaged around 10%. We have a couple of years that we'll talk about. 22 and 23 were some higher amounts, and those were simply because we had some long-term outages due to some long-term injuries and also some long-term health conditions. Those numbers actually went up to roughly 12%. As I talked a little bit earlier about the NFPA standard, several things that we looked at, several data points, and actually one law that we looked at in our staffing consideration. Again, we've already discussed the NFPA 17 standard or recommended standard. Something that was really key in looking at, has this been researched? Has this been done? Is there any data that starts to illustrate the time it takes to do our job? And one of those is a NIST study, or National Institutes of Standards and Technology. They completed a staff several years ago, and they called it the Fireground Study of the 22 Essential Fireground Tasks. And what that did was actually set up a bunch of mock and sometimes perfect case scenarios that went through and determined how long it took firefighters to do the tasks that we have to do once on scene. We'll talk about that just a little bit further here shortly. And the final one that's one of the key is what we call the OSHA standard of 2 in, 2 out, which basically says that if we arrive to a structure fire today, we need to have 2 firefighters on the outside for anyone to go on the inside. So 2 firefighters are going inside because we work off the buddy system. No one goes in a structure fire alone. There must also be 2 people on the outside to be able to go in and rescue those firefighters if something were to happen to them. So really that's the only law that applies that says you have to have X number of firefighters on a scene to do X, so to speak. As a part of that NIST Fireground study, they showed that on average a 4-person crew was roughly 25% faster than a 3-person crew. If anybody's seen any data or seen any videos that talk about time to flashover in a home, flashover is when a room becomes fully involved, and it doesn't take long anymore with all the synthetic materials, plastics, and everything that we're seeing in homes now. In roughly 3 minutes from a very small waste can fire, an entire room can go to a flashover point. That's not to say that that entire structure is fully involved. However, when that much heat and that much fire load is in a room, it certainly spreads to the remainder of the house very quickly. With that being said, 4-person crews are roughly 6% faster than a 3-person crew at simply getting water on a fire. And that takes into consideration all the steps. Some of those steps also include ground ladders, because when we get to a structure, all of our structures are elevated. Well, a portion of the job and the looking towards the goal of safety is we attempt to throw or do what we call throw ground ladders to all sides of a structure so we can effect a firefighter rescue or a victim rescue. Well, of course, I think we can all think about if we extend our own extension ladder to our home, it takes a few minutes to get it out, do it by ourselves, and sometimes it can be a little bit trying. And I think that we can probably understand very simply that a 4-person crew to get that 24, 35-foot extension ladder is roughly 25% faster. The other thing that we have to look at is if we have to go in and search a structure, there's certain things that have to be done before we can initiate, before we can walk through that door. 4 people on a fire apparatus are roughly 6% faster at simply initiating that search. We're not going into the details of the actual search itself, but just to get to that door and open it, roughly 6% faster. So, as you know, we have help coming. We are lucky enough to have our neighbors at Collington and Kildouble Hills, that if we have a structure fire today, or any other fire or emergency that we feel we need outside assistance, they will come and help us. And they do come and help us routinely and regularly. And we also repay that favor by going to help them as needed. None of the departments in this county could really do it alone. And we're gracious for those opportunities and relationships. However, something to keep in mind is the fact that for the most part, these agencies are volunteer as far as their response that comes to us. Volunteers are great. Glad to have volunteers, but we all know that it takes a volunteer several minutes to get to a fire station, several minutes to get on the apparatus and get their equipment assembled, and then of course we realize that the driving time to get to Nags Head takes them a few minutes. We looked at 20 different fire calls as a part of our ISO survey last year, a couple of years ago, and on average it took roughly 20 minutes to get these aid departments to Nags Head to begin helping us, which meant that our crews were working a substantial time before we had any help. Again, we are thankful to have them, and it's nothing bad against them at all. It's simply the nature of the travel times and the response and them getting here. Quick little detail about some staffing numbers that we'll talk about. In 2022-23, you know, we talked a little while ago about 62,400 hours between 24 firefighters scheduled at 2,600 hours a year. With that being said, we actually staffed for response 58,000 hours. We took 2,357 hours of training that was away, or we had staff that we were, of course, paying to go away for training, which is extremely beneficial to the department. That was the year of 1,323.75 overtime hours. Our vacation hours were at 3,336.37, and our sick leave was at 3,243.8. Other miscellaneous leave counts for bereavement, school leave, different things like that at 962.5. That was the year of 12%, which we don't feel like is a standard number. We feel like that and the 21, 22 were hopefully high numbers that won't continue to repeat themselves. But similar numbers as we go through there. We didn't see as many overtime hours. We did see more vacation hours. But that leave, of course, was at 11.48%. So just something to consider as we kind of look at this entire picture. Vacation leave, of course, we've looked at and considered that, and actually are implementing some changes to our vacation leave policy that may end up helping us with some of this. But things such as bereavement leave, sick leave, leave due to injuries, they're a little bit more difficult to control. And almost, you know, if somebody gets hurt unfortunately or somebody gets sick, we have to fill those outages. So an example of what we're up against sometimes. This fire was several years ago, right down the street, oceanfront home. Started on the exterior of a home and was propane fed fire. So it advanced very quickly. Thank goodness a neighbor heard the propane as it expelled from the tank and it was lighting off. She, of course, called 911 and began coming over to knock on the doors. Police department, thankfully, was nearby, also began knocking on the doors. But between these two homes, because if you look, the center home is the fire home, the one on the left side, or the count of the blue teal, was what we call the exposure home. There was 46 people sleeping, because this was about 3 a.m. in the morning. I will say that the crews did an excellent job of containing that fire to where it is. However, there were 6 firefighters between the 2 trucks that arrived. Myself and the chief arrived, so there was 8 of us for 45 minutes until some of our volunteer mutual aid partners arrived. That's an anomaly. That doesn't happen all the time, thank goodness. But because of that unpredictable nature, sometimes of our mutual aid crews, they might be out on another call. They might have something going on. There is sometimes a delay that we face. This is a simple illustration of some of the tasks that are associated and why the NFPA says 17 people. Of course, you have to have an operator for each apparatus that you have on scene. You have to have an interior attack crew, a backup crew, what we call a RIT crew, or a rapid intervention team crew, to go in and effect a rescue if something does occur. There might be a ventilation team, and then of course, at a minimum, what we call an incident commander, because someone needs to be able to supervise and oversee the scene and what's going on. Once again, they recommend 15 personnel, but if we're using ladder trucks, they recommend 17 for the simple task of the operators. They also recommend that there be an 8-minute travel time 90% of the time to get this staff on scene. Well, we know that sometimes that may be impossible because of our driving distances and because of who is able to come help us. So you might ask, what's it look like? What does the 2 Nags Head crews look like? And basically everyone that we put on the scene and we know is coming is in this picture. There's at least 6 firefighters, there's a chief there, I'm in the picture somewhere, and there's an EMS crew, and there's 2 trucks. That's what we know, that if we have a structure fire right now in Nags Head, unless one of them's committed to another call, that we'll have available to us and we'll respond. Some people might ask us, well, what else do we do? Because certainly we don't run emergency response calls all the time. The department completes about 300 fire inspections annually. Roughly 60% of the department is a certified fire inspector of some level. Those inspections, of course, are done in the off-season for the most part to try to disrupt businesses as little as possible. We also complete fire hydrant flow testing. We do public education in the community, as you know, in schools, different events such as our open house that we feel are key. Our training hours are upwards of about 5,000 hours a year. A lot of that is for continuing education for certifications, but some of it is just to keep our skills up. Home inspections at times if requested. A certain amount of apparatus maintenance, whether it be the daily checks or the minimal amount of items that we take care of. Yes, the gentlemen or the firefighters do station maintenance as well. So once again, it's more than just emergency response that we're looking at our staffing for and we're looking at the need for. There's a lot that goes into keeping a firefighter ready to respond to an emergency. So what's the future look like? Well, I think we can all agree that maybe 20, 30 years ago that none of us thought that Nags Head would look like it does now, and we're growing and there are more people coming. Will we have a continued population increase that results in more calls, longer travel distances? I think, you know, we can probably see or look forward to seeing continued renovation of properties, both residential and commercial. One big item that always comes up is volunteerism, because it's been on a decline nationally, not just in Dare County. But what will that look like in the future? What new technologies? We've seen a lot of changes in technologies due to electrical hazards, due to things like lithium batteries and things of this nature that are wonderful technology, but they pose different hazards and can cause different problems for the fire service than we used to see. The other question is, what next? You know, what else will we face that might become more challenging to us in a response? We do have part-time and volunteer staff that we're thankful for. We were able to bring on 4 part-time staff this past year. However, with that benefit, there are a few drawbacks. Due to some standards, we can only work a volunteer or a part-timer roughly 1,000 hours per year, which means it takes 2.6 of them to equal one of the full-time career staff. We have been able to use them in capacity, but also scheduling can be difficult as they have a primary job somewhere else. So we're trying to get them on their days off when we need them, and we're trying to match our need with their availability. We also have volunteer staff. We have 2 that are administrative support, and we also have 4 that what we call suppression staff that can help us on a scene. We have actually just adjusted our training policy to hopefully provide some more opportunities for them that will maybe increase their buy-in and maybe even get some more. So we're hopeful that that will be beneficial to us in the volunteer program. But as we said earlier, and it seems to be a nationwide problem, is that those volunteers are declining. We're competing for time. Everybody appreciates family time more now. Everybody's got at least one job, and if not more. So it's tougher to get those volunteers to be able to come out and help us. This is one paper written by the International City Managers Association in conjunction with the Center of Public Safety Excellence. And one of their focuses was on the volunteer service, and that there's a large decline in availability. And it's really a document trying to prepare departments and to get them thinking about, what do you do? You know, what are some solutions to this problem? So as we look at some options here for things like funding, how do we get more firefighters? How do we fund them? One thing that I'll point out here is something called a SAFER grant, and this is a federal grant. Some of the ways this has been funded was through a 3-year term. There's been different years that the federal government provided matches to this, and then other years they provided 100% funding. However, right now, this grant is normally announced and advertised right now. And at this point, it has not been. This is the final year of this program if it's not reauthorized by the federal government in September. So it's unknown if this will continue or if it will go away. So in the end, the staffing group came up with several recommendations. Took me a minute to get to this one, but I felt like that other information was pretty important. The staffing group, in considering the 2 response areas of the town, so to speak, north and south, recommended that at Station 16 across the street, we maintain a minimum of no less than 4 personnel and no less than 3 at Station 21. That would mean that at least 7 firefighters would be available daily. We would recommend that the town consider establishing 3 additional positions to make this happen. There would be 1 of these assigned to each of A, B, and C shift, which would increase the daily staffing, or the staffing, to 9 personnel assigned per day, still allowing the 2 leave spots generally, which allows it to decrease to 7. And here we are at the end. So if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer them. If there's any information that we don't have the answers to, we will get it as quickly as possible and get it back to you. But we do appreciate the opportunity in talking to you about this.
Thank you. Commissioner Lambert.
I thank you very much for the presentation, and also for the work that the committee's done on this. I do have one question for you. When you talked about volunteer decline nationally, on a national level, specifically in Nags Head, how much have we felt that?
So I will say back, and I don't have the exact numbers, when I started in Nags Head in 2003. There was a larger volunteer contingent, and it was done a little bit differently than it is today. But we probably had 20 people. And as if you move forward, those numbers have changed over the years. Some of these were older members who lived here, had been here a long time, I believe, and probably even Mr. Muller could even talk to us maybe about some of that as well. But as you move forward, I think we can all agree that just things have changed as far as how many jobs that people have and so forth. And as we talk to our other neighbors, it's a problem and it comes in waves. There might be a time when an apartment all of a sudden gets a wave of 3 or 4 volunteers, but they might lose 6. So they're great. I started as a volunteer back in 1991, and I was a volunteer for many years before I came here. But it's just becoming more and more difficult to get them. I hope that answers. Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Brink.
I would like to thank former Mayor Bob Muller and Meade Gwynn, who's not with us today, for their participation representing the citizens, and then town staff Jan and Amy, and Andy was part of that as well, and also the chief and deputy chief getting us the information that we needed to learn more about it.
Yes, sir.
And we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Sanders.
Likewise, I appreciate all the work that went into this presentation. It's very well done. Big increase in overtime hours due to like sickness and injury.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
how much would a full-time person help? I mean, that's obviously going to help reduce some of these overtime hours.
So it will help to some extent. There becomes a line of there's a balance, and if we increase the minimum staffing to 7 rather than 6, depending upon the outages, you may still have some of these leave issues. Something that we're looking at on the other side of this is adjusting some of the leave policies if possible to see if we can help offset some of that too. Some of the issues though are surprises, if you will, because if we're at a minimum staffing level for whatever reason and someone calls out sick, then of course that is unexpected and unpredicted, and here we are trying to fill the spot. So I do expect it could reduce it some. I'm not going to stand here and say that it's going to cut it all out, though.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like that'd be fair to either of us to say.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you,
Yes, sir.
Shane. Appreciate the report. Do want to echo the thanks to former Mayor Muller and to Meade. It's sometimes hard to staff committees. Very grateful for their service and their expertise that they brought to the table, the institutional knowledge that they brought to the table as well. So thank you very much.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
We will go back up now. Let's see, I'm sorry, no, we need to go to the 11 o'clock time-specific item. Forgive me. So this is a presentation from our Beach Nourishment Project Consultant, David.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Annually, the town conducts a summer beach survey. This is to go ahead and monitor the conditions of the beach, which is in accordance with the town's beach maintenance and monitoring plan. We changed it up a little bit this year. We did a supplemental survey in the fall, which was authorized by the board to go ahead and monitor the beach post a pretty significant storm activity fall that we had seen in both late summer and early fall with some pretty active wave conditions. So we've got Aisha Karanche and Dr. Besh Shadone from Mockford and Nickel here to go ahead and present the findings of these surveys. But they will also cover not only the data that has been collected and analyzed, but also some future forecasting for our next beach nourishment project to include potential sand volumes as well as the overall project cost which will aid the town in going ahead and proceeding with the financial planning for their next Nourishment project. So before we go ahead and pass it over to Aisha, we're going to go ahead and hand out hard copies of the report to each one of the commissioners.
Sir.
Good morning. I'm short, so let's do this. So I'm here to present the results of our monitoring surveys, as David mentioned. And we will first start with the monitoring, then we will move on to the next Nourishment project, and then give a quick update about the Beach Nourishment Master Plan. First, with the annual monitoring, we will start with the surveys that we have taken and then move on to our method to analyze those surveys. Then I will give results of the first annual monitoring from June to June survey, and then we will talk about what happened in that fall season where we had higher wave level events, and then we will move on to how the 2019 project is performing. So we are going to be talking about, we have our June 2022 survey, which includes all the transects in the total monitored ocean front. And then we have our post-Dorian renourishment event, which happened in August 2022, so just after our June 2022 survey. And during that nourishment, one thing to note is only reach 2 to reach 4 was nourished, so reach 1 doesn't have the influence of that project. Then we have our June 2023 survey, which again includes all the monitored ocean front. And then we have our fall survey, which was a little bit more limited, only covered the nourished ocean front from reach 1 to reach 4. One thing that we are looking at during our analysis is how the shoreline has behaved. And we are basically looking at how the mean high water moves throughout the survey periods. So that is one thing that we look at. And the next thing is to look at the volumes. Here we consider several volumes, and one of them is above +6, so above berm, which we consider is the dune volume. Then we move down to the subaerial beach, which is the beach which is always visible. It is above mean high water. Then we move on to the recreational beach, which is the wade depth, which you can sometimes see a part of it according to the tidal conditions. And then we move on to the outer bar, where we have our offshore sandbar, which grows and changes during seasonal wave events. Then we move down to our -19 depth of closure. That is where we would consider our sand system is. The sand within depth of closure is what protects us against storms. And then we have our offshore. Looking at the key events, one thing to note is how the waves were this year. So the blue lines here is showing the period from our June 2022 survey to June 2023 survey, so our annual survey. And we can see it was actually fairly calm. We had 2 storms, but they didn't have very high waves. So the 2022 June to 2023 June period was a less energetic, kind of nice wave climate time. However, when we move on to our fall survey, which covers the black lines over there, we have 3 high wave events which caused scarping and erosion, which led the fall monitoring survey to be done. The next thing to note is the post-Dorian Renourishment project, which happened in August 2022, so after the June 2022 survey. And in total, almost 600 cubic yards of sand was placed from reach 2 to reach 4. Moving on to the results of the June 2022 to June 2023 survey. It was good news because we experienced, the town experienced sand gain even beyond what was placed during the post-Dorian project. So here the yellow and the teal bars show the above -14 and above -19 changes, and we have observed sand gain, material gain in all of the reaches that was monitored. But then in fall, we got the notice that there had been extreme scarping observed at the beach, especially at Reach 1, which is kind of expected. We don't expect the winter profile and a summer profile to look similar, because in winter we have much higher waves, which will take material from the subaerial beach, but store it kind of at lower elevations. But in summer, we would expect that sand that was stored in lower elevations to return back to the profile. And through our survey, which was taken in October, we have seen, so this is an example profile, we have seen exactly what I just described, the sand that was over, so the blue line here is the summer profile and the red line is the fall profile. So from the summer profile, you can see there was scarping at the dune, there was some loss at the berm, so the visible beach had gone through some losses, but that sand was actually, more than that sand is accumulated in the near shore above -6 elevation. And looking at the overall, all of the reaches, especially as I said, the scarping was seen at Reach 1, Reach 2, and Reach 3 had like the most of that visible material moving away. We have seen all of that material moved away was captured above -6, so it is not lost from the system. It is expected to return back when we do our, and we will hopefully see it returning back when we do our summer survey. And the other thing is to note is, other than the Reach 3 North, again we have seen continued material gain above -14 and -19 feet. Moving on to the performance of the last 2019 Nourishment project, not the post-Dorian. We have, when we look at the volumes above the +6, so where we are looking at the dunes, we are seeing growth in the dunes, other than reach 4, but again, in reach 4, the losses are pretty minor. They are not big losses. When we look at our shoreline, so here the green bar is where the shoreline was at after the the 2019 project, and the pink bar is where we were after the post-Dorian 2022 post-Dorian project. And you can see the surveys right after these nourishments generally show a lot of recession. And that is expected also because of the profile equilibrating after a nourishment event. And again, we have seen it in these surveys. However, still we have accretion compared to June 2022, but yes, there had been some, as you can see, profile equilibration after the 2022 Dorian project. Then we are looking at above -19, so it is our system. When we look at what has been happening is reach 1 to reach 3 north, we are seeing more material in the system compared to the post-2019 project. However, and we also put in the effects of the 2022 post-Dorian project as the hatched bars on top of the other bars over there. So it has obviously positively influenced this effect, but we do see, even without the project, reach 1 to reach 3 north would have had more sand compared to June 2022. Whereas reach 3 south now has lost, again, a minor loss compared to 2019 project, but 2%, we are seeing 2% loss. Reach 4, unfortunately, is the most eroding reach, and we are seeing 33% of what was placed in 2019 project lost from the system. And this is an overview of all the elevations, and so we are observing sand gain above +6, so the dunes are growing, and we are again observing sand gain in lower elevations than -6. But the middle of it, which is more like the recreational beach, is losing some sand. The sand is still in the system, but more of it is at the lower elevations, and when like it is the lower than -14, we might not expect, like we will expect it to provide protection against storms, but we might not expect it to help with recreational purposes. It is not on the visible beach anymore, and we need to monitor it closely because since it is at lower elevations, it can move out from the system quicker. So key takeaways are there was observed scarping in 2023, fall 2023 due to high wave events, but that loss was captured in the lower elevations above -6 feet, and we expect it to move back. There is material gain observed in the system even beyond what was placed during post-Dorian project in the last year, but they are in lower elevations, so it should be, they might not return back to the recreational beach in shorter time frames. So this brings us to the next Nourishment project, which we expect to be carried out right now in 2027. And we got these placements according to what we got from the master plan and recommendations from the town. And then we got our approximate costs for these amounts here. So we are expecting a project of approximately 2.2 million cubic yards. The sand placement cost for this project is approximately, and these are the 2027 numbers, so they were inflated. So the sand placement cost is expected to be 13.5 million. The mobilization cost is 6 million. Sand fencing, so the dune stabilization cost is 400K. Engineering, permitting, and construction administration is approximately 850. Field investigations, if required by agencies, we don't know if they will or they won't, but we wanted to put a price up on that just in case. It is about 420, and the total comes up to 38.2 million. And we wanted to give an update because the last time we talked about the master plan, we left it at what our nourishment cycle should be, with the recommendations from the town, and with our calculations, we did end up with a 6-year nourishment cycle, nourishing all the total nourished beach, reach 1 to reach 4. We believe 6 years gives us enough flexibility to deal with if there's a sudden change or not, but this should be also thought about in a flexible way. If erosion doesn't occur, we don't have to do it. This is just a planning window, obviously, but we feel like 6 years is giving the most feasibility for a required flexibility that we would have. And this is all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Questions for you?
No questions, but thank you for the presentation.
Yeah.
Sounds like basically there's still a lot of sand in the system, huh?
Yes, I mean, I would say this year is very fortunate. I don't know if we will expect this to continue this way. It always continued this way. It would have been great.
Yeah.
I think there's a large sand movement right now. It's happening. Part of it also might be northern towns also with Nourishment, and some of their material might have shifted into the town of Nags. We will see how it continues. I hope it continues.
Yeah, it's pretty good news. The recommendation for the next project in 2027 is the volume overall is significantly less than we've been doing. So I think it kind of speaks to the patterns we've been seeing, and we'll be talking to you next month as we begin the budget process about the next project and our financial model. And so what they presented today will be what we're basing a lot of our assumptions off of when we start doing the financial planning, so.
Good. Thank you.
And we'll make sure that copies of this report is published online under our Beach Nourishment main landing page.
Great. Thank you, David.
All right,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
Now we will move backwards to reports and recommendations from the Planning Board and Planning and Development Director, and call Director Wyatt to the podium.
Hey there. So I won't take too much of your time with this. Just a brief update on what the Planning Board heard at their January 16th meeting. So obviously we had the election of chair and vice chair. There was continued conversation on the long-term rental of hotel suites and drafting the text amendment for that. There was consideration of removal of drive-through restaurants from all zoning districts within the town. This was on your consent agenda today. It will be public hearing in March. Staff also presented sort of a draft work plan for the planning department moving forward in 2024. A lot of items on there, but just a note was to identify and correct the areas of incompatibility between the comprehensive plan and the UDO, which we've discussed that in the past. Developing and presenting an ordinance for ADUs that had a menu of options for consideration. Developing and prioritizing strategies for implementation of the Estuarine Shoreline Management Plan. Continuing to implement the decentralized wastewater management plan and trying to come up with some creative strategies to gain participation. Looking at non-regulatory approaches to residential lighting and continuing our efforts of digitizing our existing records and going more digital than having so many hard copies around. The planning board's next meeting is on February 20th, and we're going to continue the conversation on long-term rental of hotel suites and look at an ordinance that we'd previously discussed about being able to place barriers around your septic components to prevent parking on those. The Board of Adjustment met on January 11th. They heard an appeal that was submitted by Joe Searles. He was appealing the issuance of a building permit at 4313 West Soundside Road. The Board of Adjustment, after hearing all the evidence, voted to affirm staff's decision to issue that building permit. The Board of Adjustment does have another meeting coming up tomorrow, actually. It's another appeal. It's been submitted by Brian Harvey, and it's related to an NOV that was issued because of him operating a detached accessory structure in a use that was not permitted by the town. So it's coming up tomorrow. The Septic Health Advisory Committee, they met on January 30th. A lot of the conversation with that was updates on the installation of the groundwater level monitors as well as the water quality monitors. There was a lot of good information there. Also, our two new members, Rob Crawford and Gary Ferguson, were available. So they also had a lot of great input, especially Rob Crawford, considering his background and knowledge with the health department. Estuarine Shoreline Management Plan, as was noted in the work plan, continuing the implementation of that plan. We have had a couple meetings with our grant writing consultants, with Coastal Fed, the Dare County Soil and Water Conservation. There are potential opportunities to look at some more attainable options for the Estuarine Shoreline Management Plan. We, of course, didn't get the large grant, but we've identified other opportunities, and we think there's some, maybe some forward movement with doing some living shorelines around Catfish Farm along the causeway, potentially partnering with Sugar Creek Restaurant, as well as working with the Visitors Bureau for their project. So some more attainable things there. Earlier in your consent agenda, you approved a budget amendment, which is going to help facilitate next steps for our EV action plan. Low Wire Technologies will be purchasing the equipment itself, installing it. Low Wire's also agreed to a 5-year maintenance plan. It's going to keep us on track with our grant requirements. Sand relocation and dune management, it's continuing to be busy. As of February 1st, we've allocated $187,000 towards the dune management cost share and have received over 142 sand relocation applications. So it seems to be going well. The town had its first winter market on Saturday, January 13th. It was very successful given what it was. Our event coordinator had reported that there was over 100 visitors, and many of them stopped by to express appreciation for having the opportunity to come out to a market like that. So the next winter market is going to be on Saturday, February 10th from 9 to noon. And right now we have about 5 or 6 vendors participating in that. Event coordinator, Paige Griffin, she has really spent a lot of time in preparing for the upcoming season. She's working on getting the summer markets organized. I believe she already has most of her bands booked for the upcoming season, so she's excited about that. And also working on our family fun nights and having new organizations and people there to do that. As always, the Art and Culture Committee, we like to give you an update in March to give you an idea of how last season went and sort of our expectations, hopes, and big asks for the coming season. So we'll be here at your March meeting to do that as well.
Very good. Thank you. I know the new winter markets have been well received. It's yeah, I really like the way we do things. We take baby steps and see how they go, and that's been positive. So it's good to see.
Paige has done an amazing job.
She has. Commissioner Sanders, any questions or comments?
I do have a question about the sand relocation project. Have you heard from any of the people that last year that participated and how well it's working or not working? Or?
Yeah, I think everybody's, I haven't heard any negative feedback. Everybody's been very appreciative of the opportunity to offset some of those costs. If anything, the feedback we're getting is if they received the full $3,500 last year, you know, obviously they can't get that full amount again this year, but we can offset sand fencing and stabilization. But everything's been going well. It's very well received and people are appreciative.
Good, good. And I'd also like to thank you guys for continuing to try to move the needle on the Esther and Shoreline Committee. Thank you.
Getting there.
For the project, yeah.
Thank you.
No questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
No questions. Thank you for the presentation.
Great.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. All right. Now we have old business, items tabled from previous meetings, and we have final acceptance approval of the emergency operations plan. Chief Wells.
Good morning again, Mayor Commissioners. This should be a fairly quick item. Last month, you were presented with the emergency operations plan. The consultant, Shanty Smith Copeland, presented you from the EOP that was revised and done. There was some language changes you wished to be made. We went ahead and made those changes. What we're looking for today is just formal approval of the plan so we can get a promulgation letter signed and get the letter put in place.
All right. Great, thank you. Any questions for the chief? All right. Thank you. I think we can do this with 3 commissioners present. Is there any reason we can't do that? Continue?
You can.
Okay.
Do it.
All right,
Just need
then,
more.
in that case, I'll ask if a motion can be made.
Make a motion that we approve as presented.
All right.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That brings us, okay. That brings us to new business, and we will go to item I3, being committee reports. I'll ask commissioners if they have anything to report. Commissioner Brinkley?
The Septic Health Committee met, but I was out of town. I know Kelly gave a brief overview of that.
Okay. All right, great. Thank you. Anything going on at the pier?
I had COVID during their last meeting.
Oh,
so
okay. Gotcha.
I hope to be able to attend the one in this meeting.
All right, very good. Commissioner Sanders?
You already heard about the Shoreline Committee, but I did, the Jockey's Ridge celebration for the 50th anniversary was held, the first meeting, and it looks like it's gonna be a really nice and really big event. Town manager was there, and it is set for the summer of June. It'll be June 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. So.
And I think that next committee meeting is this afternoon, is that?
What's
right?
that? It was yesterday.
It was
Yeah.
yesterday?
Yeah, the Jockey's Ridge, yeah.
All right, very good. Thank you. Wait for Commissioner Lambert. Commissioner Lambert, do you have any committee actions to report?
I actually wasn't, I did attend the orientation, but I had a pre-planned trip for the first meeting this month, so I wasn't able to attend. But I did see that our local programming initiative grant was approved.
All right.
And we do have another meeting scheduled at the end of February as well.
All right, very good. Thank you. Appreciate that. That brings us to item I4, which is consideration of appointments. And we have an appointment to make to the planning board, or a reappointment, as the board sees fit. Struggling to get there. Thank you. So Megan Vaughn's term expired February 3rd. She's interested in being reappointed. So we need to make an appointment to the planning board, and I would ask if there is Megan's name to be put into nomination, or any other names the board wishes to bring.
Mayor Cahoon, I'd like to make a nomination to reappoint Megan Vaughn.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, thank you. Appreciate that. So next is an overview of the Ocean Rescue 2023 season. And Chad, welcome.
Okay, so let's get started off with a little review of our past season. Let me make sure this thing is working right. Okay.
You can use the mouse. And just
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go. Okay, so 2023 season, just kind of at a glance, our total staff for the summer, around 52. Water rescues, 326, which is about average, maybe a little above average. Moving down here, medical calls, just under 100, it's about typical. And then educational contacts and beach populations, right around average for what we've been seeing the last 10 years. Last one there, beach closed days, 31, above average. Okay, we had a lot. So and that's kind of going to lead me into my first topic this morning. So our current staffing levels for peak operations, and I'll get into what the timeframes are, but we have 15 fixed lifeguard stands, 6 roving lifeguards, 4 supervisors, and a beach captain. Gives us a total of 26 people on our beach per day during peak operations. And I tried to break this down. I know it's a lot of information here, but we kind of ramped up and ramped down, so phase up, phase down. Starting in April, we bring on 2 staff per day to get ready for the season and respond to anything that may come up during that time period. Early May, we bring our supervisors in for a week of training, and then that bleeds right into our regular lifeguard training leading up to Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day weekend, we hit with full staffing, peak operations, 26 per day, and then we phase down for a few weeks where we see a dip in beach population activity. So we're down to 21 per day. So we've decided to remove 5 of those 15 stands and phase down. And then mid to late June, around the 21st of June, we ramp back up to full operations. And we maintain that. The goal is to maintain that until August 15th. And then we start our phase down. So between August 16th to Labor Day, we're somewhere between 15 to 19. That variance depends on what we have available for staff. That is one of the more difficult times to staff our beach due to the majority of our staff is college-age students, and as a lot of you probably know that colleges are starting back up and kids are leaving to go back to school, and I think every business in town feels that struggle. And then post-Labor Day, so from day after Labor Day till the end of September, we're at about 10 staff per day. And that has increased the last couple of years. We've decided to keep up 3 stands, fixed stands in town, provide some of that fixed lifeguard protection. And then October 1st to 15th, 4 staff per day, and then the 16th to the 31st, we keep 2 people on per day to finish closing up things for the season and respond to any possible emergencies that exist. So that's just an overview of our season and staffing levels. So, one of the main reasons I'm here today is just to get your final approval for a new flag system that we've proposed. And I think I proposed this at the board retreat in 2022. Put it in the budget last year to appropriate the flag, signs, and different things for that. So just looking for your final approval for the flag system, and then some corresponding wordage in our ordinance for swimming prohibitions. So these are the signs, what they'll look like, that we'll have at our beach accesses. So the proposal here is for water closed to public will be a double red. And we have a single red for high hazard and a yellow flag for medium hazard. And then I'll just bring your attention down there at the bottom. There is that QR code, which you may have seen throughout the county this past summer. And that's been done by Dare County Emergency Management. That QR code takes you to their website for Love the Beach, Respect the Ocean. You've probably heard their jingles on the radio, all kinds of promotional stuff for safety, beach safety. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, how our flag system will relate to that here in a second. Let me click forward. Come on. Okay. So our goals of updating this flag system is to take upon the national, international standards. So back in 2004, I think I put this in your guys' notes, there was the International Life-Saving Federation and the USLA, which is part of that international federation, adopted a flag standard. And part of that is the double red, the red, and the yellow. My goal for updating our flag system for better education and consistent messaging. That consistent messaging kind of mirroring what the NOAA Rip Current forecast is and Dare County Emergency Management's Love the Beach, Respect the Ocean campaign. So if you've ever seen their Rip Current surf forecast, usually there's a map of the Outer Banks, and they'll mark it gray when there's low risk, yellow when there's moderate risk, and red when there's high risk. And so with our flag system, I want to, when it's yellow, we put up a yellow flag. When it's red, we put up a red flag, and then we would make a determination based on hazards, staffing levels, beach population about when we would close it. But the overall goal, too, is to try and reduce the total number of days that our ocean is completely closed to the public. Okay. So our current swimming ordinance, or our swimming prohibition, is here on the board, and it's in your notes. And then on the next slide here, I've put in some notes about where we would like to make some changes. And basically, the town manager or their designee is authorized to make the determination when it's unsafe, and we would close the ocean to the public. That unsafe conditions have been abated during such periods in which swimming is prohibited, and after reasonable notice is given to the public, to include posting of signs on the lifeguard stands and double red flags at public beach accesses to the Atlantic Ocean. Swimming in the Atlantic Ocean would be unlawful. The town or their designee shall make the determination whether or not the ocean conditions are safe based upon observations and the effects of winds, tides, storm conditions, environmental conditions affecting the surf in the Atlantic Ocean. The town manager shall take into consideration weather reports, existing storms in the Atlantic Ocean, and proximity of those storms to the beaches, town, and the effect thereof. So basically just trying to update the language in the ordinance to reflect what our goal is here, and move forward with that. Any questions from you guys about any of this, the flags?
No.
Okay, you guys good with us moving forward with this plan?
Well, I think because there's a ordinance modification in particular, and we need to do this formally.
Okay.
John, you've reviewed this.
I've not reviewed this, and I had a question for Chad.
Yes, sir.
About this.
Okay.
I mean, I see that that there's only a limited modification made here, but the question I have was, this prohibits or allows the manager or their designee to prohibit swimming. Is that broad enough? I mean, should it be broader than swimming, like wading?
Sure, yeah.
Or,
Typically, yeah, you bring up a good point. Usually what we tell people is entry into the Atlantic Ocean is unlawful, and maybe that verbiage needs to be in there.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Our mistake for missing that.
Well, that's what it was already in there. I mean, I just, as I look at it now, I'm thinking it may need to be a bit broader than it has been, just so we have the proper enforcement mechanism.
And then under this, which I did not include here, there are exceptions to that law, which includes surfing, and the other one is bodyboarding with, there's terminology in there about the equipment that has to be used with fins and leash and all that sort of thing. So that doesn't change. This is the first part is what we recommend change in the language too, but yeah.
So the double red flag doesn't change any of that?
No.
Okay.
All right. So,
I'd like the opportunity to review this, though, in a
Okay.
little bit more detail before the board takes action to adopt it. I think it might be, just so we can do it once and be done.
well, let me ask you, and I'll direct this to Andy. If we go ahead and approve the plan, including the flags, is there any financial implication? Does any of this affect the budget planning process? No.
The flag system was already in the budget this year.
Okay.
And so I think Chad's just trying to make the board aware that we were proceeding with the system.
Okay.
So I think we have time to bring this back in March.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. Let's bring this back in March then with the ordinance updated and reviewed by the attorney, and then approve the whole thing as one shot.
Yeah, I think the assumption is at this point that we'll approve the change to the ordinance and the flag system is okay.
Yeah, I don't see anybody saying that that's not okay.
So
We're-
like
yeah, we're doing
anything that Chad's planning, you know, as far as installing things or ordering materials, all that's good to go. And
Yes.
And then we'll just make the changes formally in March.
And additionally, this is a police power ordinance, so no public hearing is required or anything.
Good. All right.
Yep.
All right, so we'll come back with that. And so, challenges going forward, second part of what I'm here to talk to you guys about. Recruiting and retention of quality staff. So under that, competitive pay and safe, affordable housing. So I've got two proposals here that I'd like to put before you. As we're continuing to recruit, both, we're looking at pay both locally and regionally to ensure that we remain competitive with not only lifeguard jobs, but other jobs that are in the community as well, and trying to get staff. Last year, we made some significant improvements in our pay and bonus structure, and as a result, we saw some improvements in our recruiting and retention. In your notes here, you see in 2022, we had 42 staff, and last year we had 51. Locally here, we have one agency that is already advertising $18.50, and for the upcoming season, our current rate is at $18 an hour. So we're asking the board to consider us matching that $18.50 for the upcoming season, and then looking at adopting to 2025, $19 an hour. Just because we see that rate continuing to be competitive and move up. We've also included here some numbers that if we want to go rate to 19 for 2024 and 2025 as well. So the financial implications are there. So we would have to increase our budget for the 23-24, our current budget year, by $7,928 to get to that $18.50. And then it would increase our budget for the next year's budget by $25,394 for the first proposal. And then the second proposal, the numbers are up there,
it would increase our current budget year by $15,856, and then going forward, it would increase it to $34,933. So if the board were willing to agree upon an increase here, we could begin advertising immediately to help that recruiting effort for the remaining 3 months that we have. And then a revision to the pay plan and budget amendment could be provided at the March meeting and adopted there.
Okay, all right, very good.
Any questions?
Any questions for Chad? Or somebody interested in making a motion?
I would make a motion that we increase the pay for this coming season to $19 per hour. Don't skip the $18.50, let's go to $19.
Okay.
Chad and them do a great job, and I think it would make things easier for him on recruiting.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there a second to that?
Yeah, I would second that motion. I think
Okay.
it's good.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion then? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you guys very much. I appreciate your time, and I'll be back here in March to do the ordinance thing and on your review and stuff like that. So again, thank you guys, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I kind of hate the one-upmanship that our neighboring town does to us from time to time, but I kind of enjoy poking them back.
And we're taking care of.
Yes, we are. All right, that brings us to a presentation of the strategic plan. Andy?
Okay, I'll try to be brief, recognizing that we do have a tour scheduled today. So we are presenting to you the draft strategic plan that you've been working on really for the last few years, but most recently in November. As you recall, this past year, we decided to supplement our strategic planning process with a community survey, which we presented the results to you back in November. And that highlighted a lot of concerns from the community, which are reflected in the document you have today. November 16th and 17th, you held the retreat. That was a 1.5-day retreat with the board and staff. And I think we came up with some good recommendations. Hopefully, what you see in this document reflects what you expected to see from those discussions. So we're currently in the strategic plan development process. Hopefully, we can finalize the document today. We have already started working on some of these items, some of the things we were already working on, and then we're forming working groups internally to tackle each of the action items and establish teams and develop strategies and milestones. So that's already underway as well. We'll probably address a lot of the strategic plan items during the upcoming budget cycle and CIP. We are working on some things for the CIP to address some of the things in the plan. And then obviously the strategic plan affects all the future policy, program, and budget considerations the board has. So when we went through the strategic plan with our facilitator, we start at the high level talking about our mission, vision, and values. And then we have our strategic goals, objectives, and action items. And then that all requires people and resources. So we had a mission statement in the town that hadn't been addressed in quite some time. It was on our website, but sort of buried in the website, and it was fairly lengthy. So when we talked to the facilitator, Emily, she really wanted us to hone in on a very abbreviated mission statement that really kind of got to the point, and something that we could rally around and was sort of memorable and repeatable. If we're trying to sort of ingrain this in our culture and values, is something that's really more easily delivered to staff and the community. So the proposed mission statement is to support the well-being of our citizens, property owners, and visitors by delivering municipal services in an open, respectful, and responsive manner. So basically, that's the purpose for which we exist as a town. This is something that we sort of finalized during the retreat. We also came up with an abbreviated version of our vision statement, which is really just looking at our vision, our aspirational goals for our community. And so the statement says to thoughtfully preserve our unique coastal environment, heritage, and lifestyle now and for the future. And then, as you can see below here, I left this in here. This is the vision statement that we currently have. And so I didn't feel comfortable deleting this in its entirety, since it does show up in our comprehensive plan and in several locations in our publications. And also, a lot of people have spent a lot of time working on this and were really vested in some of these statements. So I hope you like the way we sort of approach this in the document. So that language really just helps inform what we mean by the sentence above that. So moving beyond the vision and mission, we have 4 goal areas that we came up with during the strategic plan. We have environment, development, economy, and community services, with really brief goal statements defining each one. Environment, we have to safeguard our critical natural resources and coastal ecosystem. Development, to achieve responsible adaptive development that aligns with our community vision. Economy, to promote a sustainable economy that supports residents and visitors. And then community services, to maintain an efficient government that provides high quality and cost-effective services. So going through each one, we start out with the environment. Well, we have several objectives listed at the top there. We talk about maintaining our natural resources, mitigating risk from natural disasters, certainly educating the public, and then clean water, very important to the town. And so a lot of the action items I didn't list here in the presentation. They're in the document in your packet. But we have strategies to address shoreline management with our beach nourishment plan. We have the work being conducted by our septic health advisory committee and initiatives by staff. We do have a grant we received for a stormwater management plan that will be getting underway in the next year. We currently have a plan being conducted to update our water system master plan, and that also includes looking at water rates. And so the board suggested looking at a water rate structure that incentivizes water stewardship usage. Obviously, we talk about climate change and adaptation, sort of ripples through all the things that we do. And then infrastructure, we talk about maintaining resilient infrastructure and connecting our infrastructure planning together, so that when we do a streets or stormwater or a water line project, primarily those are all planned cohesively, and we have a long-term plan for conducting those projects. This is our development goal. We talk about looking at our land uses to make sure that we have appropriate land uses within the town, that our zoning and our policies encourage resilient infrastructure. We look at public spaces and preservation of those. And then we look at traffic movement and pedestrian safety, all being very important things to the town. We have some specific action items that were recommended to go back and look at a lot of our zoning and land use policies to make sure our land use plan is aligned with our zoning ordinance, and making sure that we're implementing the community character that we desire. We have some specific action items that look at preserving open space. One in particular looks at applying for conservation easements on town-owned land for a fairly large tract around the fresh pond. And we talk about housing strategies, and not just in terms of town employees, but also participating in this working group the county has formed, and how we might address this on a more regional scale. Lighting is something that came up during our survey. Community members were concerned about impacts of residential lighting, so we talked about that, and primarily looking at ways to incentivize people to be more respectful about lighting, especially with respect to their neighbors. I already mentioned infrastructure. Something that we've been doing that's become a very strong program is our grant procurement. We have been very successful in the last couple of years of not only receiving more grant funds, but also grants for which we have never applied, we're now being successful receiving, and we expect that to continue. And we have a good working group internally and with a consultant that's really pushing this really far forward. We also talk about transportation, pedestrian safety, and traffic safety. I kind of combined all this together, a lot of different initiatives related to that, some that require working with DOT, some we can look at internally. Also looking at our pedestrian plan once again, and looking at the priorities in that. The economy goal area, we talk again about workforce housing. was some discussion about trying to connect the town better with our local businesses here in Nags Head, and so the idea of facilitating the formation of a merchants association came up, and something that we'll be trying to work on. This idea of sustainable tourism, that's something that the tourism board has been talking about a lot. You know, one of the issues that came up in our survey was over occupancy and congestion, and the feeling that, you know, we really need to manage better our visitation, making sure that it's least impactful on the community, and so that made its way into our plan. And housing strategies mentioning again, and then finally protection of the beach. You know, one of the things we talked about is making sure that our beach is non-commercial. We've had a lot more activity on the beach in recent years with commercial businesses, and so we may need to go back and look at some of our policies related to that. Finally, community services. You know, I think the big thing here was focusing on our workforce. You know, if we have a good workforce, then we're going to have good services, and we're going to be able to deliver those services effectively to our residents and visitors. So I think we're continuing the momentum that the board has carried forward in the last few years and making sure that we have a great workforce and can recruit and retain them. We're also talking about developing a series of performance metrics to measure what we're doing and our accomplishments, also recognizing the achievements of our employees. We are currently working on a master plan for the town campus that relates to the replacement of the fire station. In the future, potential partnership with Dare County to develop an EMS station in Nags Head, and also looking at the other needs here at our town hall campus, and obviously recognizing that one thing affects another, and so we need to look at it comprehensively if we're going to be doing this. Finally, working with other agencies, seeing where we can cooperate better with other agencies, maybe having some formal mechanisms to communicate on a regular basis with some of the agencies. One example being NCDOT. We meet with NCDOT as needed, but maybe having a standing meeting at least once a year, and also inviting the other towns where we can talk about issues of regional importance. And one of the things that has come up in the last few years is this corridor study that was in our comprehensive transportation plan that we haven't really moved the needle on. And you know, I think that sort of holds the key to the future of making 158 a safer corridor and more meeting our expectations and our values as a community. So what's next? We hope to finalize the plan. You know, the last couple of pages of the plan, there was a discussion about the board's priorities. So we tried to capture what the board had stated during the retreat. So we'd like a little feedback on whether or not those do reflect the board's priorities. As I mentioned, we are already working on putting together ways to implement this plan and track progress. I mentioned in the document that we would update the board at least twice a year on the progress of the plan. And then obviously next month we'll start our budgeting process. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, would appreciate any feedback on the plan.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Lambert.
I've enjoyed looking through the plan. I thank the staff for all the work that they've done on it. Andy, I like how you left the vision as articulated as follows. I do see the value in that, and I think it gives a big family feel, and I like that when I read it. The other two things I really loved about this plan was the staff involvement in it at the retreat. I think that was really important to have their involvement and to see how they felt about it. And I really loved that the community survey was involved in it, and I think it's very reflective in the action items, and that's very important for that community involvement component. So I was pretty happy with it.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Brinkley.
Just two things that Commissioner Lambert said, the staff involvement and implementing the community survey aspect into it. Great, and thank you for the presentation.
Yeah, you're welcome, thank you.
Commissioner Sanders.
Well, I agree with the other commissioners, and I thank you for the presentation, and I like that this plan is very proactive, and you're not sitting back waiting on stuff to happen, but you're going out, as you said yesterday.
We talked about that.
Yep, as you said yesterday. So, yeah, I think it's a great plan.
I would say, you know, I said it when we were at the retreat, that I think any citizen who had been able to sit in that room like fly on the wall would have been really proud of the way the town thinks of them and conducts itself and thinks about how we better serve them. I hope that as we roll into this plan, this updated version of the plan, I think it would be nice to message to the public how we listen to the survey. You know, I could see us putting out multiple messages to say, you know, take something that's in the plan and something that was in the survey and match them up. And just go ahead and tell the public how the town is responding to their concerns. I think that would be, I think, for one, I think it's just good service to the citizens that they know how we're hearing them and how we intend to, you know, spend their resources in the interest of the goals that they've expressed. And I also think it just in terms of the way people appreciate the town's efforts, I think it would be helpful.
I think that's a great idea. We had a lot of responses to the survey, over 1,000, and if people can see that we're reacting positively to their responses, they're more inclined to participate in the future. So.
Yes, exactly that. I think that's right. All right, very good. Thank you, Andy. Items from the town attorney, Mr. Leidy.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to report.
All right. Andy, then we'll bounce right back to you and our update on the public services facility, which we're going to see here shortly, and then on the task force.
All right. Good morning again. This is a This is a similar format that we've used to present the progress of the public services project in the past. Here on the screen, we've got an overview of the proposed public services complex with Lark Avenue bisecting the main campus and dividing that up with the admin facility, which is over here on the right-hand side. So we start off each month with going ahead and notating what we highlighted last month and then comparing that with the progress over the past 30 days. So this is where we were last month with the administration building. We had some of the siding starting, and you can see that we had the block wall. We had the windows and doors had not been put up yet. And as we progress to this month, we can see that we've got windows in place, we've got some doors that have been placed, and we've got the siding which has been started along the top half of the structure. You'll note this is the northern exposure of the building right here. You can see we're nearly complete, minus the addition of the exit door on that side of the building. As we progress to the interior of the building, this is the conference room. You can see we've got the drywall hung, some of the base paint layers, and also the ceiling grid and some of the fixtures installed. And this is another interior space. This is one of the bathrooms, and you can see that they've already started on the tiling of the bathroom. So a lot of progression. We're starting to see some of these final elements take shape and form. Also on this site is the drop-off ramp. This is where we were last month, and from this picture you can see all the concrete has been poured on that main platform, and they are currently working on the north side drive and going ahead and finishing that up. So we're not only seeing just the vertical construction component, we're also seeing some of the finishing site components take place. Moving over here across the street, over on the west side of Lark Avenue, this is where we were last month with the Fleet Facilities and Sanitation Building. You can see that some of the block wall had been started on the exterior of the building. This is the main common area for those three divisions. And this month you can see There's been progress made to going ahead and finishing off that facade with the exterior block wall. They're just getting ready to start on the brickwork here on the common space. And again, we've got windows in place and just waiting on some of the doors to arrive and be installed. This is on the back side or from the south. You can see that the block work has progressed, to about 75% of the vertical height of the building. And on the inside, there's also some finishing work. This is taken from the mezzanine, looking towards the west into the facility's maintenance bay. So progress being made in all buildings throughout the complex. The one building that we hadn't seen as much progress over the past couple months is the equipment building. This is where we were last month. And as we look at some of the progress that this is also from last month. This is the mezzanine, and you can see they were just starting some of the flooring finishing work in there at that time. You can see they've been able to go ahead and finish the front facade of that building. There's still some siding to take place on the upper portion of that facade. And on the inside, you can see that the floor has been poured, and also that mezzanine has been finished off. So getting close to a lot of the external components for that building. And then lastly, we've got the water distribution building, which, see if I can't get that to come up. Go backwards from here. This is where we were last month. We had some of the exterior block that had gone approximately 50% up the wall. What we've seen is we've seen a lot of the utility work take place over this past month. You can see here on the back side, you've got the power meter, a lot of the power related appurtenances, as well as some of the solar infrastructure. And I've got some other pictures to show some of that work. Again, we're seeing some of the windows go in, and then on the interior, we've got drywall going up, and some of the plumbing, mechanical, and electrical work being finished off inside the facility. So one thing I wanted to show was, and I just received this, the solar panels have been installed on all buildings. And so this right here is the larger building. This is the fleet, facilities, and sanitation building. This is taken from the southeast corner of the project, overlooking the roof of that facility. You can see all the panels that are associated with that building. And if I can get this to work. Here is the water distribution building. Again, this is taken from the south, and it shows the solar panels that have been installed. And moving down, this is the administration building. You could see the panels that have been installed on the roof for these three facilities. So with that...
You can't really see those from the ground, can you?
On the water distribution building, you can, because of the slope of the roof. Mm-hmm. For the administration building, no, you can't unless you get on the back side of the drop-off ramp. And then on the larger building, you have to go to the south property line to even see a little bit of the exposure. So from the ground, you're really not going to be able to see them, with the exception of the water distribution building, and you'll only see that internally from the site. Cool. And that's all that I had, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have.
It's really good to see the progress. I should know this. Do we have vehicle charging stations? Will we have vehicle charging stations?
We do. We've got, I believe we've got 2 over at the admin building, and then we also have the base infrastructure set up for our vehicle storage building.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
so we've got the planning for that.
Okay.
The one thing that I did not mention was schedule.
Yes.
And I know the board's always interested in that. This month, we've seen a little bit of creep in the schedule. I know over the past months, we were targeting late March for occupancy of the first building, which is the admin building. We're now into April. So we're looking at mid to late April right now for the administration building. The water distribution building is lagging a couple weeks behind that. The larger building, the fleet facilities and sanitation building, we're well into June with that. And the equipment building, I think, is probably closer to the fleet building timeframe. And then lastly, the vehicle storage building, as you'll see from our tour. They haven't started on that, but are planning on doing so here within the next week or so.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Is some of this related to the power infrastructure?
It is, and so having these buildings energized is a critical path.
Right.
So we had worked with Dominion on going ahead and setting up the base infrastructure for the distribution network for this complex. We had our own town staff go ahead and install the conduit for that. That was finished last month. Dominion went ahead and released that for construction. When they release that for construction, they have a subcontractor come in, pull those wires, set those transformers. And so that's where the delay takes place. And so with the finishing work that they can do now, there's probably going to be a little bit of a lag time. And they get to a stopping point where they can't move forward until they have some kind of energy to pull off of and be able to complete that finishing work.
Good, thank you.
But staff has been working with Dominion representatives to see what we could do to minimize that time frame as much as possible so we can reduce any lag time where little to no work is taking place.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the tour today.
You ready? Thank you. Great. Thank you, David.
All right, thank
Appreciate it. Andy, that brings us to an update on the Housing Task Force, the Dare County Housing Task Force.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I had included this under my agenda today just since Mike Sears, our Mayor Pro Tem, is not able to be here. He also serves on this task force. We had our first meeting last month. We are looking at meeting on a regular basis monthly for the near term. Our next meeting is going to be on February 20th, which is the third Tuesday of the month. The first meeting was really more of an organizational meeting. They went through some of the history of efforts in the county to create affordable housing. They even talked about the Outer Banks Community Development Corporation, which is no longer in existence. They went around the room and asked all the participants to give their own unique perspectives on housing. And Mayor Pro Tem Sears and I both did that. You have a copy of what we said in the minutes. You can see what everybody else said as well. A lot of interesting discussion items. You know, I think one of the things that the county manager brought up is legal authorities for how we develop workforce housing and what we can use public funds for. And so that is something that we'll probably want to pay attention to. We sort of brought this up in a lot of the discussions we had last year related to workforce housing, you know, with the Wodo Cooper project and what they're trying to accomplish with those types of projects. It's really related to low-income housing, the low-income housing tax credit program, and really looking at providing housing for people that make 80% or less of the area median income. In a lot of cases, it's 60% or less of the area median income. When we talk about our local workforce, in many cases, those folks make more than those amounts, and so they wouldn't qualify. And I think that there's a question that the county manager brings up about how we can spend public funds. And based on case law and legislative authorities, including the Constitution, the understanding is that we cannot spend public money on anything above that 80% threshold. And so that creates an issue with trying to provide housing for the local workforce. And so I think one of the things the committee's talking about is pursuing some legislative initiatives to try and see how we can create some flexibility there. And so I think that was a good thing that came out of the meeting. It seemed like the members on the committee, the task force, wanted to see a broad, multi-pronged approach to looking at the workforce housing issue, and something that really acknowledges the uniqueness of each community. So essentially developing a toolbox that each community could then go back and implement the things that they felt were most appropriate for their own communities. And so that was one thing that I think was a consensus of the group. A lot of things that will come back this month, some research that they're going to conduct and share with the group. And they also talked about developing a mission statement. This was forwarded to us by the county clerk. Donna Creef with the Realtors Association took the initiative to develop a mission statement, which is on the screen. And I'm sharing that with you in case you want to provide any feedback to go back to the larger task force. So with that said, that's really all I have for you this month.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments for Andy or for the task force at this point? Okay. All right, thank you. Then that brings us to the Board of Commissioners agenda. I can't remember where I started last time. I'll start with Commissioner Lambert. Do you have anything for the board? Commissioner Green? Okay. Thank you. I don't have any actions. Over the last couple of weeks, I was able to attend the Water Summit for the first time in Greenville. This was the third year. This is something that Congressman Murphy and Congressman Rouser from further south down the coast got started, and it was a full day. There was a lot of information, and it focuses basically on resilience against flood, and it was a pretty good program. I was glad I finally got to go, and I've been able to give some feedback. They did send a survey, and so when that comes up again, I think it would be beneficial possibly to a member of staff and maybe another board member to attend, because it was beneficial, and there are a lot of good networking. There are a lot of grant, a lot of regulatory agencies, a lot of political leadership there. So it's a really good opportunity. And then last week in Charlotte, I also attended the Governor's Offshore Wind Energy Resource Task Force. And we have finally, that task force's real mission is, it's not really about whether and where wind is offshore. It's really about making sure that North Carolina industry gets a cut of the action for all the offshore wind. And one of the reasons we met in Charlotte was because there's a wire manufacturer there who is actually providing the conducting cable for some of the offshore projects in the northeastern United States. And so there were some interesting panels about North Carolina manufacturing opportunities and how North Carolina industries are getting involved in that. We do hope that task force will meet. The next meeting is in Raleigh. We are trying to get one at the Coastal Studies Institute. So hopefully, and then that'll give an opportunity for more folks to come and observe those discussions. That brings us to closed sessions. We do have a request for a closed session for a purpose to discuss, let's see, a closed session to discuss possible acquisition of real property in accordance with General Statute 143-318.11A5. And a motion would be in order.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, and the board will be in closed session. Thank you. All right, the board has returned to open session. Mr. Leidy, will you please report?
Yes, sir. The board did discuss the potential acquisition of real estate, but no actions were taken.
Okay. Is there other business to come before the board before we leave? We will be recessing to the tour and then dismiss ourselves there. Andy, what is the setup there? Do we have time to grab a bite to eat or something between here and there?
We can, sure.
So it's about 10 minutes to 1. What do we think? 1:30? Is that enough time?
Tim Oakley is there.
Yes.
And I think,
You just need to go take your dog out?
Yeah, I mean, just 20 minutes.
Okay, all right. How about, well, how about if 1:15 then? And we'll wait for you. If it takes a little longer, that's fine.
so everybody's just gonna drive there and meet there?
Yeah, I think that's the
driving
best way
van.
to do that.
We're driving well, we don't have to drive the van. Because if nobody's coming back here, then we might as well just drive separate.
Yeah, I think that's right. So, we will recess for the facilities tour beginning about 1:15, 1:20 or so. All right, very good.